Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became a ghostly vigilante part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story next day from AO3. So let's start the video. Shinso cursed the sound of the alarm clock that shattered his wonderful dream about a certain green-haired boy. He shifted in bed, and somehow, a growl served as a warning that if he wasn't careful, a certain feline would end up biting him. Nothing that really mattered to Hitoshi, who approached the little ball of hatred to bury his face in it and give it an infinity of morning kisses. The cat eventually tolerated him before going back to sleep. "Damn lucky bastard," he muttered. A couple of knuckles rapped on his door before it swung open. "Get up, little listener." Present Mike encouraged him with an energy that should be illegal at 7 in the morning. Hitoshi responded with a growl. 2 minutes later, he was dragging what was left of his will to live into the shower. Elsewhere in the apartment, Present Mike was wrestling with his extra strong hairspray and hair gel for his hero look, just like every morning. Somewhere in the living room, Aizawa was probably sleeping with the rest of the cats in the house. It was weird, super weird. Today was his first day of high school, and he was nervous, unlike every previous year. This time Hitoshi had a hot meal for breakfast with freshly brewed coffee to give him energy. For the first time in a long time, someone cared that he had everything he needed for his first day of classes. His uniform was freshly ironed, he had new backpacks and notebooks, and books he didn't have to borrow from school. Well, not a home-cooked meal. The truth was, neither of his foster parents was good in the kitchen. Quite the opposite. They were a disaster that deserved to be banned from the kitchen. No, there was enough money in his wallet for him to get whatever he wanted at the cafeteria. At UAS cafeteria because that's where Hitoshi had been accepted. "Leave some coffee for the mortals." Aizawa's ghostly voice came from the floor. Hitoshi, halfway dressed after his shower, clung to his coffee mug. "For that, you should first be alive. And you don't look like it," the teenager replied before pouring a second cup of coffee and handing it to Aizawa. Mike burst into the room, fully embracing his hero persona. "Are you still like this? Come on, we'll be late." The whirlwind of energy that moved them in the morning. No, Hitoshi had never had such a warm place before. He had only been with them for 3 months, but it felt like much longer. It had been strange, very strange, walking into a place knowing that the room had not been built for him but for his best friend, who was still missing. But that was Izuku, Hitoshi told himself. Was he mad at his friend? Yes, because Izuku was being foolish to think that Hitoshi could replace him. No, Hitoshi wasn't there to replace Izuku. And Mike and Shota had made that clear the first week he arrived at their home when they noticed Shinso's hesitation to enter his own room. Because that wasn't his room, it was Izuku's. His now adoptive parents sat him down on the couch in what felt like a strange intervention. In one corner, a cat was vomiting a hairball, and in another, a phone was ringing incessantly. And as important as both of those things might seem, Shota and Hisashi focused solely on Hitoshi. "We know this has to be weird and difficult, coming to live with 2 strangers. But we assure you, we want you here, Hitoshi. We want this house to be your home." Since then, the apartment had slowly been rearranged to accommodate Shinso as one of the family. The new Aunt Nimari had given him an Xbox on the first visit. Apparently, she wanted to compete hard for the title of favorite aunt, even when she had no competition. Hisashi, as an authoritative figure, was terrible. He was too playful and kind to be taken seriously. Shinso soon discovered that the man loved giving affectionate hugs at the slightest opportunity, as if Shota or Hitoshi were his assigned plush toys. The blonde was a strange mix between a cool dad and a helicopter parent. He became anxious about wanting to do everything right as a father. Maybe it was first-time parent syndrome. He tried to cook and always ended up in a mess, but he tried. He went out of his way to buy anything that seemed to attract Hitoshi. If Hitoshi stared at a cat blanket, Mike got him the blanket without asking. He got him notebooks, clothes. It seemed like he wanted to shower Hitoshi with love and affection. While initially, Hitoshi was less receptive, the blonde had started to break down the teenager's defenses, especially through ice cream. He cared about the school Shinso was attending, helped him study, and even let slip that the entrance exam for UA consisted of robots. That moment had been quite comical, Shinso remembered, sitting on the couch eating pizza for dinner while Aizawa was on patrol. That night, Hisashi had bribed him with energy drinks so that Shota would never find out the truth. Then there was the fact that Hisashi was Present Mike. And wow, the man had his own studio at home for when he couldn't make it to the radio station on time. He was a teacher at UA and also worked as a pro hero, albeit fewer hours than a full-time hero, but he still pursued it. Mike was that cool dad that one was proud to call their dad, although it might still be too soon to call him dad. On the other hand, there was Shota. Shota was what, at first glance, appeared to be a complete mess. In truth, as a human being, Shinzo had never questioned so much whether it was worth existing. Eraser worked longer hours as a pro hero, something Shinzo had always known since he was a child and had always admired for it. But he was also a teacher. Well, a teacher without a class, literally, without students. But in the rest of his life, he seemed, how should he put it, barely passing. Hitoshi had seen him sleep on all sorts of surfaces, subsist on the bare minimum to avoid exertion, and spend hours focused on cases. But when something had to do with Hitoshi, the hero seemed to pay special attention. Do you want to be a hero? I don't recommend it, Aizawa muttered one night. It's a crap job where you can easily die. That hit Hitoshi like a punch. So, you don't think I can be a hero? The pro hero didn't even flinch. I didn't say that. I said the job is crap, he corrected calmly. Anyone can be a hero if they really try. Have you ever trained? And that's how they both started training every evening after Shinzo's classes and before Eraser's patrols. Unfortunately, the training hadn't been enough for his entrance exam at UA. Getting him through the general studies route didn't sit well with him. Well, that was a lie, it did bother him. But this time, he had two parents who supported him and assured him that he could switch to the hero course as soon as the sports festival arrived. Aizawa promised to expel as many students as necessary. Mike repeatedly hit him with a pillow for his initiative. The festival was a month away from the start of classes. For now, it was still his first day. Shinzo was going to work hard to advance his personal training with Eraser by the time the festival arrived. The family was very excited about the start of the school year with all the changes. But silently, all three knew that someone was missing. Izuku was missing, with his smile, babbling about all sorts of possibilities. Izuku had become a strange taboo subject. What all three were clear about was that one day, Izuku would return. Whether by good terms or bad, he would return. 3 months had passed. 3 months since Izuku had left Musutafu and everyone he knew. Well, except for Dabi. Dabi was an ultra-special case. The same one who should now be returning from work to his new home, a small apartment in the dangerous area of Tokyo. But, you see, the rent was cheaper and well, no one dared to mess with Dabi and his flames. For Izuku, he was untouchable. Literally. That's the good thing about being a ghost. You can choose to be corporeal or not. It had only been 3 months since Izuku had promised Dabi that he would blend into the crowd and not stand out, at least until news of his body was forgotten. 3 months, and Izuku was running like a madman with his hood up while a group of gang members chased him with sticks and bats. The idiots didn't know that Izuku was actually leading them straight into his trap, right in front of one of the heroes patrolling the area, and as far away as possible from the poor victim they had almost beaten up. Izuku emerged onto the street, followed by the gang of thugs. By the time the hero turned to see what the commotion was about, Izuku was out of sight. Only the stunned gang members remained, and a hero who started lecturing them. No, Izuku Midoriya was incapable of staying out of danger. There was something in him that made him act without thinking, something that didn't sit well with Dabi. But, as always, it's not like anyone could stop Izuku if he didn't want to be stopped. What a shame. Izuku resumed his routine patrol route. He couldn't help it. He couldn't just stay at home doing nothing. He had thought it would be easy, he lied to himself. But this time, he was trying to be more inconspicuous, always pulling up his hood when he went outside. He spent more time invisible and tried not to interact too much with people. Keyword, tried. At the end of his night, Izuku tended to always end up in the same place. Only now, instead of the abandoned beach in Dagobah, it was a posh cemetery in Tokyo. Hey, you. It's already dawn. He spoke to Tauya Todoroki's grave. Well, to the supposed grave of Tauya Todoroki because without a doubt, the one buried there was his own corpse. Today, most of the classes start. I wonder if Toshi got into the hero program. I'd love to see him in that uniform with those bags under his eyes. I'm sure he'd be complaining about how big and expensive the facilities are on the inside while internally fangirling. He chuckled at the thought. It must also be Kaken's first day. I'm sure he got into UA. The ghost sighed, sitting in front of the grave. I miss them. I miss Eraser. And the detective. Mom, Toshi. Izuku couldn't help but break down in tears. He had told himself that this was for the best, that everyone would move on without him. How wrong he could be. Maybe in another universe, on this day, Izuku would also be getting ready to go to UA. But in this one, he was crying by himself at Todoroki Tauya's grave. What are you doing? An unexpectedly cold voice interrupted him. Izuku wiped away his tears and looked up to meet a pair of blue and gray heterochromatic eyes, a scar across one eye, half white, half red hair, tall, and wearing a UA uniform. Crying, Izuku replied, annoyed by the disrespectful intrusion. I can see that. I mean, what are you doing crying here? The teenager pointed out. Izuku blinked in confusion. It's a cemetery. People come to cry in cemeteries, duh. The stranger furrowed his brow. Do you have to cry over a stranger's grave? Or are you some kind of weird and twisted Endeavors fan? Izuku jumped up indignantly. Hey, I haven't insulted you or disrespected you. Don't accuse me of being a fan of that piece of crap. Something in the familiar's gaze changed. From coldness to, was that intrigue, curiosity, approval? Oh, shit. Wait a minute. Tall, heterochromatic blue and gray eyes. Blue like 𝗬𝗲𝐽𝐬. White hair like 𝗬𝗲𝐽𝐬 when Izuku helped him dye his roots. Roughly around Izuku's age if he hadn't died. And in a UA uniform. Oh, shit, you are a Todoroki, Izuku said, entering panic mode. That seemed to amuse the teenager. Yes, I am. And you're at my brother's grave. Izuku brought his hands to his face, trying to hide his embarrassment. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Coming here to talk calms me. I'm sorry. The teenager didn't seem to care much about what the green tadpole had to say. I don't care, Todoroki said, acting cool. I just came to tell my brother that I'll become a hero without using that bastard's power. That said, I'm out. I have a class to attend. Izuku was left speechless as he watched the teenager place an ice flower on the grave before turning and leaving the way he came. In short, Dabi would kill him if he wasn't already dead. A normal first day with just one expulsion to start the year. Not bad for a teacher with the worst reputation like Eraser. The only difference was that this year he had to be very careful about giving explanations for who he decided to expel or not if he didn't want to be accused of making room for his son. And, well, yes, Aizawa wanted to make room in his class for Shinso. But it wasn't his fault that a handful of hormone-driven teenagers with dreams of greatness made it so easy. First day and one expulsion and a warning to Minoru that he had 1 foot out of the class. After the test he conducted every year for the first years, he had the rest of the afternoon free. In previous years, Aizawa would have stayed behind reading the reports of students he hadn't expelled yet. Each student needed a specific plan to bring out their best potential. But this year was different. This year, while leaving his husband and now also his son at home discussing the latest and greatest podcast by God knows who, Aizawa was heading to the police station. He wasn't going for tea and biscuits with Tsukauchi, to be precise. No, he was going to follow up on any loose ends Izuku might have left. Izuku Midoriya had disappeared again 3 months ago. 90 damn days then it left the detective and the pro-hero with a case with more loose ends than any Jack the Ripper victim. The former broom closet had become a strange hole of theories, clippings, and reports. An old photo of Izuku Midoriya in his Aldera Junior School uniform, the same one that was in the yearbook. An old photo in civilian clothes from when his mother still showed up at the police station. Now, however, the woman seemed to have left the country. Literally. It was impossible to get in touch with her because apparently, she had decided to go to the United States. It can't be a coincidence, Aizawa pointed out irritably when Tsukauchi gave him the news. She's leaving on the same day the body found out on the beach. Come on, 𝗵𝗲𝐴. We've arrested more people for much lesser reasons. The detective couldn't help but agree with the hero. The problem is that the case doesn't hold up without a body. Even less so when we'd have to do an international hunt. Aizawa spent that week in a bad mood for that reason while convincing himself that going to the United States to drag Izuku Midoriya to the interrogation room was not a good idea. If he hadn't done it, it was for no other reason than his family. Mike could understand, yes, he would probably be the first to pack his bags to go with him. But now there were 3 of them. Itoshi deserved a stable home, parents who loved him, and yes, both Zashi and Shoto loved the kid like crazy. That's why the subject of Izuku Midoriya was taboo in the house. They wanted to protect their new son from the roller coaster that was that strange case, because every time they seemed to have a clue, they ended up with dead ends or more questions. But Aizawa wasn't going to stop. Neither was Tsukauchi. They've given a deadline for the resolution of the request for the tests performed on the corpse. He informed him as if that were breaking news. And it was, because whoever had stolen the body from the morgue and deleted the forensic files had overlooked the possibility that tests had already been performed on the corpse. In fact, the body on the beach had been opened up when they took it away. Now some tests were missing in the hospital, tests that could help uncover part of the truth of the great mystery. The first step was to fight the bureaucracy to get the professionals to search for the evidence. Oh, even if it was slow, Tsukauchi and Aizawa were making progress. When we have it, I'll pay a personal visit to the morgue, Eraser promised with a terrifying smile. The doctor in charge of Izuku's autopsy better prepare himself, because even though it wasn't his fault to lose the child's body, he had done his best to avoid questions about the case. Apparently, not being able to find the evidence prevented a diagnosis of the cause of death. Oh, Eraser had come so close to strangling him when they first met that 𝗵𝗲𝐴 had to step in between them. All right, please. No witnesses, the detective said before changing the subject as if nothing had happened. I think we're on the verge of being able to confirm the time of death for our beach corpse. We could reconstruct the day to find out what happened. Eraser skimmed over the notes. A normal day like any other. The boy left home normally. He arrived at school. He got involved in an attack on one of his classmates and ended up coming home upset according to his mother. Aizawa summarized with a furrowed brow. Damn it, why aren't there more details? Tsukauchi sighed heavily. At first, another investigator handled the case. It only fell into my hands when he started his nighttime activities. Both remained silent for a while. They were both aware of how quirk-centric their society was. Izuku Midoriya didn't matter if his name was written above the word quirkless, but that played both in favor and against the detective and the pro-hero. In favor because emphasizing that it was a boy qualified as quirkless hadn't attracted media attention. The body found on the beach had been used for a small part of a filler page. This had favored them in terms of being able to investigate without setting off media alarms. But on the other hand, that same card delayed their every procedure. Maybe I have a lead, but I want to make sure I'm really on the right track, Aizawa announced in the same monotone tone as if he had just been asked if he wanted coffee. Tsukauchi took a moment to process what he had just heard, more engrossed in the documents in front of him. Wait, what? Aizawa took a sip from his coffee cup. I've been pulling strings in the underground. I don't want to get my hopes up, but there's a possibility that there's another case related to ours, the pro-hero casually informed. Tsukauchi heavily placed the papers on the table. What case? Tell me more, he demanded, eager for new threads to pull on. Eraser made a wry face. It might be related to the disappearance of another minor in Nagoya. I want to investigate it up close. I'll go in person, though your help would be appreciated. The detective sighed. Of course, that's why he was telling him. In their strange professional relationship, the detective tended to share more than his colleagues did. Fortunately, he had a quirk that made him indispensable. Of course, I'll make time, the detective promised. Dabi hadn't imagined his life like this in a million years, being a responsible adult taking care of a minor. Well, who was he kidding? That was as much a lie as the fact that Izuku Midoriya could stay out of trouble. The only difference is that when Dabi promised not to get into trouble or illegal stuff, he at least kept that promise, especially the second one. As for the former, he tried. There he was, being a responsible adult or the closest thing to it he had ever been in his life. Having a legal job. Well, technically not, because Dabi didn't have documentation. But at least he wasn't selling drugs again. Apparently, the world of nightlife was claiming him on its brighter and busier side. Dabi was beginning to navigate all the pubs as a beloved guest, not as someone who sold illegal stuff or ran errands for others. The difference from Musutafu, old man Matsumoto wasn't there. But that didn't mean that the help from that man didn't come in other ways than with the initial money he had given Dabi. Mr. Matsumoto had managed to put in a good word for him. Although he found that the door guardian dog position was usually already filled, he got another job as a bartender behind the bar. During the first few days, he spent more time learning combinations, washing glasses, and cleaning the floor. Izuku had been by his side, laughing every time he tried to spin the bottles with style. There was a moment when he thought about quitting, and he would have if it weren't for Izuku. Fuck, that kid was softening him, and he was letting himself be softened. But that smile was worth protecting. When he finally started working at night, Dabi discovered that he strangely had a way with people. Something about him attracted customers. Maybe it was his mysterious personality and his air of not giving a shit about anything. Or maybe it was the tenderness that came from a tough guy protecting a baby face. Whatever it was, the pub now had more visitors, and few of them complained when their order was wrong. Dabi liked his job. Well, he knew it was exhausting, and the night hours weren't the best in the world. But it wasn't bad to know that there were people waiting to see him at work every day. Colleagues, regular customers. What he didn't expect was for them to set him up. Well, not just anyone. Izuku fucking Midoriya, also known as his adopted little brother or Pipsqueak, smiled at him from the other side of the nightclub as if he were a saint. And that only meant that something was going wrong. Not a minute later, the DJ appeared at the bar in a hurry and approached him desperately. Man, I need help. I'm about to poop myself. I think something was off. His face contorted in pain as he spoke. Dud, are you okay? Dabi started to sweat. That damn angelic smile. It was clear that his little gremlin had something to do with it. I'll be fine, the DJ promised, completely bent over the bar. Go to the booth and act like you're playing, man. You'd be saving my ass. Dabi didn't show any emotion. Inside, he wanted to strangle a certain person. I don't know how to play. The DJ blatantly stole a bottle of water from him. It doesn't matter, no one will notice, he said before leaving. The man left, and there were two paths in front of him to choose from. Maybe he could stay as a flirty and mysterious bartender, or he could climb up and pretend to be a DJ. Staying would have been the sensible thing to do. But internally, Dabi was a drama king. What if someone offered him the spotlight among a bunch of drunk people and loud music? Well, Dabi was a showman by nature. The fire user climbed up high, checking the programmed playlist. Did he have to put on a show? Well, Dabi would give them a show. His personal little gremlin raised his thumbs, adding fuel to the fire. and suddenly, there was Dabi dancing around himself while pretending to play here and there. By the time the next song started, Dabi was already grabbing the microphone. "Mummy don't know Daddy's getting hot at the body shop, doing something unholy. Look, if the atmosphere was lively before, it was now heated. Maybe they would fire Dabi for getting on stage, microphone in hand, dancing as if the world were about to end, singing with his dark and enticing tone just as the song required." By the time the song ended, Dabi had his own personal fan club. By the time the next one started, he was just about to get on the bar. By the time the DJ returned, Dabi had taken over the entire audience. When he returned to the bar, Dabi wasn't aware of all the changes that had happened in just 10 minutes. He was so surrounded by people that he didn't even realize how his personal gremlin disappeared through the wall. Dabi couldn't help but fall into the kid's distraction trap. Suddenly, he was with her boss, being yelled at to keep putting on more of a show if it meant selling more and more alcohol. That night, Dabi went home with more money in his pocket than usual and a half-smile on his face. Technically, Izuku wasn't getting into any trouble. Theatrically, he was just doing a bit of breaking and entering. Well, after all he had done, sneaking into the house of the number 2 hero wasn't that big of a deal. It was nighttime. Well, it was almost dawn. He would have arrived earlier if that DJ had drunk his full lactose-filled milk coffee a bit earlier. But it was all right. Izuku could continue with his plan, because something very interesting had happened since the beginning of the day. He had met Dabi's brother, Shoto Todoroki, and well, he had to admit that the brothers were quite similar, especially in their stubbornness. But no, Izuku wasn't there to stalk Shoto Todoroki. I mean, Izuku was creepy, but not that kind of creepy. No, Izuku had something else in mind. Something much more fun than uncovering Todoroki's secrets. Izuku Midoriya opened the room door of Inji Todoroki's bedroom and closed it with a force that made the door crash loudly. By the time Inji ignited his flames, Izuku was in his invisible ghost mode, laughing heartily without anyone being able to hear him as he watched Inji Todoroki go on guard and yell at thin air. "Who's there? Natsuo, I swear." As soon as Endeavor turned on the room light, Izuku became tangible on the other side of the room and hit the switch, turning off the light. A quick move that the hero couldn't anticipate. The number 2 hero straightened up and walked heavily, making a lot of noise while he turned the light back on, despite illuminating the room with his own flames. Izuku wasn't afraid of him. He couldn't see him, he couldn't touch him. So the boy went straight to the house's electrical panel and switched off all the automatics. Endeavor yelled, "Do you find this funny? Huh, who dares to enter Endeavor's house? I'll kill," and other things he said. Kill Izuku. Good luck with that, the boy thought. Another door slammed open. "Can you shut up, old man? Some of us are trying to sleep." Oh, well, that must be Natsuo Todoroki. Izuku approached the hallway, curious about the family's role. In his mind, it looked like a documentary. The alpha male got agitated because he felt disturbed. The young male seemed annoyed by the old man's loud screams. In the middle of the argument, before it escalated, a petite figure appeared between both males. "Please, calm down. Maybe the circuit breaker tripped, and that's why the power went out. Calm down." The young woman who tried to soothe the situation by placing herself between both males. Oh, Izuku could get some popcorn and admire his masterpiece. But no, he couldn't make himself visible. That wouldn't be fun. What would be fun? Writing Dad with his finger on Endeavor's bathroom mirror, so when the hero took his shower, the message would appear. Now that was fun. And as the sun rose, Izuku left the Todoroki state, leaving almost the entire family arguing, while Shoto Todoroki left through the back door just to avoid seeing anyone in his family's face. It seemed like young Todoroki would arrive at UA much earlier than usual. As Izuku left, he danced the dance of chaos, something that wasn't very pleasant to watch because of how poorly he moved compared to, well, anyone. Izuku Midoriya had the gift of chaos, not dance. Most mornings had both insomniacs contemplating each other with tired eyes. They both normal sported a cat in their lap, a cup of coffee in hand and dark circles stamped permanently under their eyes. No, they didn't resemble each other in any way, they thought. No resemblances here. This morning had started off differently, and Hitoshi had been directed to the kitchen table after stumbling bleary-eyed out of his room. Mike was in the process of getting into his hero costume as he sagged into his chair and owlishly blinked at the table and breakfast in front of him. He admonished Shoto with a similar bowl and a pointed look. "No jelly pouches this morning." A grumbled intelligible reply was Shoto's only response around his cup of coffee before he wolfed it down. He was out the door not even 10 minutes later. Hitoshi was eating his breakfast slowly. A bowl of cereal, yogurt, and fruit sat in front of him that he kept stirring with the occasional bite. Obviously, this wasn't his idea. Hazashi had made it his mission to ensure the family adopted healthy habits, fearing that Shinso would end up like Shota. The cup of hot coffee that was Hitoshi's normal breakfast was missing from his side, replaced with a cold glass of milk. Hazashi had nearly screeched his ears off in surprise when hearing about the amount of coffee he could drink in a day. The lecture that followed resulted in a restriction to the large amount of caffeine the teenager consumed because Hitoshi was apparently in a growth stage and blah blah blah. So there he was, stirring the cereal bowl with the promise that if he finished it in the bone juice, he would get his cup of coffee. It's worth mentioning that he had been sitting at the table for 20 minutes straight without any progress, lost in his mobile app. "Come on, Hitoshi, you won't have any energy later," Hisashi told him, placing a hand on his shoulder to encourage him to eat. Hisashi was a whirlwind in the morning, getting his hero costume on, trying to find different items he kept in the front entryway or in his room. Shota would continuously chastise him for shedding his costume all over the apartment as he wandered in from his shift. The teenager didn't have the mood or the strength to manage any sound beyond a little grumble. "We'll be late." That came from the bathroom as the blonde attacked his hair and the atmosphere with extra strong hairspray. Meanwhile, Hitoshi kept scrolling on his phone like nothing was important in his life. Present Mike sighed and reminded himself that he was dealing with a teenager after all, something he was used to dealing with as a teacher but not as a parent. Well, until 3 months ago, his only children were stray furballs that Shota snuck into the apartment when Mike wasn't looking. Obviously, Shinso wasn't a cat. Well, Mike hesitated for a moment when he saw him licking the yogurt off the spoon like a feline testing whether something was edible or not. His eyes were narrowed in serious contemplation and his little nose even twitched. No, that was a semi-adult human with trauma that he had to take care of. "Come on, you can finish breakfast in the car," Mike conceded, approaching the teenager to swipe his mobile suddenly. Hitoshi's shoulders went rigid at his sudden approach, and as Mike reached for the mobile that he had been hunched over, he recoiled away from Mike on instinct. He could see the hero's motion freeze like his heart had skipped a beat. He had feared for a moment that Mike was going to hit him, and to be honest, for a moment Hitoshi did think that would happen. But Hisashi wasn't like the other families he had been with. Shota and Hisashi are nothing like the past families, which meant many more unknowns in Hitoshi's book. "I'm sorry, Hitoshi. I didn't mean it wasn't my intention. I won't do it again," the hero promised with a broken heart, seeing how the boy held his breath. The shame and guilt lined Mike's face, the one hand holding the mobile frozen halfway to a pocket on his costume. Hitoshi watched him for a few more moments, as if trying to analyze the level of threat in front of him. Hisashi chose not to move, afraid of scaring him even more. After a tense breath, he tried to extend the mobile back. But the boy simply moved away. "I need to change," he said softly, avoiding Hisashi's gaze and disappearing into his room, leaving present Mike feeling guilty in the empty room, mobile still in hand, and an unfinished breakfast going soggy on the table. A familiar tune interrupted his thoughts, and he flipped the mobile over to see a burning man singing and giving it his all. Uraraka had always considered herself a good girl. It had been clear from as far back as she could remember that she wanted to help her parents. She always remembered her small house, lonely from her parents coming and going, always exhausted from work. Her best childhood memories were the days when she could accompany her parents to work, even if she just sat in a corner with a book, next to the radio playing music on a random FM station. She enjoyed being in the same space while her parents toiled away, watching them put in so much effort to make ends meet. She had decided early in her life that she wanted to help them with her quirk. It was her childhood dream. Daddy, I can lift it. I can help," she often offered, cheeks puffed with concentration even though she knew she wasn't allowed to use her quirk. Her father always gently stroked her head. He had a delicate touch for someone with calloused hands, nothing that really mattered to Uraraka. Her mother's hands were the same, and she gave the warmest hugs. "Baby astronaut, you have to dream of the sky," her father always told her. "Because on Earth, we're already here," and he would boop her nose, "aim higher, where you can always find a wealthy man." Her mother would tease, then her father would pout, pretending to be angry at those words, arms crossed with fake annoyance. Achako's mother would end up giving him a kiss and telling him that she loved him even more than any imaginary rich man. Their eyes creased with unspoken laughter at the banter. But that didn't mean their daughter had to marry a wealthy man. The Uraraka family was a happy little trio, living in a small apartment in a small town. From a young age, Achako wanted to give her parents the world. An island if necessary, a mansion, the best retirement they could wish for, trips around the world, without a worry for cost or accommodations. But Achako couldn't marry a rich man. Well, mainly the idea didn't excite her too much because it didn't sit right with her. Over the years, she pieced together clues as to why. Young Achako, with more cheeks than eyes, knew she wanted to be the rich and powerful one. She wanted to earn it herself. Her parents worked with sweat and tears to put food on the table. Their effort and willpower ran in her veins. Achako would strive and be her own savior. Wait a minute. That was it. The epiphany struck her one day, waiting for her parents to come home. She could become a hero. Growing up, on the other hand, meant realizing that no matter how many hours her parents worked, food was still scarce. Growing up meant realizing how her mother silently cried at night because the construction company that subcontracted them blamed them for making poor quality buildings that were affected by villain attacks. Because in the adult world, there were insurance companies. And if there was even a slight chance to avoid paying, they would. And when the blame fell on the construction company with a reputation for subcontracting to make more gross profit, that company passed the buck to the subcontractor. All the paperwork proving all the budget cuts by the big company didn't matter, or how they forced her parents to use lower quality materials despite their multiple warnings. Money always went away, one way or another, and 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 knew that from a young age. From the beginning, instead of going to pre-K or a kindergarten like the rest of the children, 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 stayed with an elderly neighbor, something that continued for years. She knew her textbooks were always borrowed. She knew she didn't live in the best neighborhood. She knew many of her neighbors were in similar conditions. Yes, 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 wanted to be a hero to take care of her parents and become rich. But 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 also wanted to be a hero for all those people who, like her, needed a hero to give them hope. And she was determined to be that hero. All Might just entered her life as a coincidence of fate, as a sign from destiny. It had been purely coincidental when she was coming home from school. A truck barreling out of control nearly sent multiple people to an ice sky when the #1 hero appeared out of nowhere to prevent the impact, making the truck fall onto what appeared to be abandoned rubble. But that wasn't rubble, it was old Mr. Misho's home. Uraraka acted without thinking, ignoring everything else. She used her quirk to lift the truck, then the debris blocking his door, frantically searching and calling until she located him. She didn't care about the nausea, and fought against the strain it placed on her quirk as they made their way out of his demolished house. She didn't care if the police would find her. Uraraka only cared about the well-being of the elderly man. Fortunately, the man escaped with just a few scratches and a broken arm. That's when her mentor entered her life, right after apologizing for the inconvenience she would face with the police, but she didn't regret her decision. Mr. Misho was more important than any repercussions. In return, the hero said something that shattered all the young girl's preconceptions. Never be afraid to save someone. That's where a true hero's heart lies, when you act without even thinking. You remind me of a young man I met not long ago. All Might acknowledged, and I would like to train you to become the next #1 hero. And well, Uraraka would like to say that she said yes and jumped full of joy, and everything in that moment was perfect. But in reality, that was the moment when her quirk said, "Enough is enough," and she proceeded to vomit onto the shoes of the nation's most influential hero. She had never been more embarrassed in her entire life. Uraraka straightened up with a smile and said yes before the hero could back out. Like, how am I letting this opportunity go? All Might, to his credit, didn't flinch. Well, he moved his foot a little and tried to discreetly shake off the vomit chunks, but he did his best to ignore the embarrassing situation. From there on, All Might became Toshinori Yagi, a flesh and blood person, and One for All became 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽's goal. Nothing comes for free. Be careful. The teenager's words echoed in her head day and night. To date, Uraraka had been following All Might's American dream plan, and the truth was, she was starting to dislike the United States. Running until you vomit, cleaning heavy appliances like washing machines and refrigerators while thinking about the states of the USA. Well, it didn't inspire much. Maybe a tetanus booster was its true goal. But she knew it was necessary to achieve what she wanted, and if 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 wanted to be a worthy hero, she would train no matter how demanding. It was a dream to think that All Might, out of all the dozens of heroes, would train her for almost half a year to prepare her for the UA entrance exam. It was incredible. She didn't mind waking up early and spending most of her time at the beach. The payoff would be worth it. And there was Toshinori, usually there to encourage her even if he often reminded her of a frail cheerleader. Her beach training was infrequently interrupted with a new character, a kid that could pop up out of nowhere. Must be an invisibility quirk, was the first thing she thought after being started one too many times. The mysterious green-haired boy only appeared when the hero wasn't around. The boy who seemed younger than 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 but not by much. She noted he was always in the same clothes, a gray hoodie and blue jeans, with scuffed red sneakers. He reminded her of Mr. Misho. He probably didn't have a home, or maybe his home was complicated, or both. Uraraka wanted to help him even though she didn't know how. 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 kept waking up in the middle of the night with the memory of the boy's corpse lying on the beach. Don't go there. Don't trust. Be careful. The boy's voice continued to echo in her head. The image of a pale boy, skin dry and clinging to what little muscle remained. A decaying pineapple. She didn't know why, but she couldn't forget the pineapple. It was like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. But that hadn't been a nightmare. It had been real. Uraraka had seen Izuku Midoriya's ghost, and he had warned her to be careful with All Might. No, with Toshinori Yagi. Because the boy knew Yaga's identity, something that was a state secret. 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 was terrified. 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐽 tried to warn the police, and when she was about to do it, when she gained the confidence to speak at the police station, Toshinori Yagi walked in through the door to take her away. Never before had Uraraka felt so powerless and so afraid at the same time. Her ideal dream had dissipated as if someone had thrown a bucket of cold water over her, because it was now that she realized how messed up the situation was. For the past few months, 𝗂𝗧𝗄 had been lying to her parents, telling them she was going to train, which was true, but without telling them where or with whom. And she didn't tell them because All Might had told her it was better to keep it a secret. For months, 𝗂𝗧𝗄 had gone every morning to a secluded place that was perfect for hiding a corpse. Because, in fact, that's what had happened. All Might had never planned to clean the entire beach or for 𝗎𝗓𝗓 to clean it up so quickly. 𝗂𝗧𝗄 was completely convinced that All Might had killed a boy. But she had no evidence, and we're talking about Japan's #1 hero, a beloved international icon. The same hero who had taken her out of police custody without even needing an ID. It was becoming more alarming. But at least she had gained some time. I need a little space to think and prepare for the exam. I need time, she whispered with all the courage she had that morning, fearing that the hero would Detroit smash her out of existence. 𝗎𝗓𝗓 steadied what strength she had to muster up the courage to buy some time. All Might put his hand on her shoulder. I'm dead. Whatever you need, young 𝗂𝗧𝗄. I'm your mentor. I'll always be here for you, even if you don't see me, he promised her. You'll be the best hero this country has ever known. I truly believe that, right? Come on, I'll walk you home. Oh, damn, right. All Might knew where she lived and her family's situation. That day, when she arrived home, her parents couldn't understand why their daughter was lying on the bedroom floor in a ball of anxiety and fear. Her parents could only hug her and be there for her. Sweetie, it's just an exam. I'm sure you'll get in, her mother tried to console her. If not, there are other schools, dear. 𝗂𝗧𝗄 cried in silence, feeling trapped and unable to tell her parents what she was afraid of. Not only could she not tell them, she couldn't tell anyone, right? Then came the UA exam. And with all the training, she aced it, but she didn't feel joy. No, 𝗂𝗧𝗄 couldn't feel elation at the acceptance letter. She only felt scared, a pit of fear pooling in her gut. Then came the first day of class, meeting new students and a new teacher. The novelty amidst the normal. The innovative part was being in the hero course and having to fight, right off the bat, is this teacher serious? For her place to stay in the class. Now she sat in a hero school, a fortified building teeming with pros looking after them. 𝗂𝗧𝗄 hadn't felt this safe after months of living in anxiety. Yes, I can do this, she told herself. After class, I'll go talk to Eraser and tell him. She thought for herself. She will do it. Here I am, entering through the door like a normal person. 𝗂𝗧𝗄 paled and felt her stomach drop to the floor as the class erupted into cheers. Dabi was both angry and happy at the same time. Well, annoyed might be the word instead of angry. He was losing hours of sleep again thanks to a certain impertinent brat who wasn't coming home. In fact, when Izuku finally showed up at almost 8 in the morning, he found Dabi standing there with his arms crossed and a frustrated scowl on his scarred face. In any other family, you might expect the teenager to come home a little tipsy riding the high of an elaborate prank. In the Dabi Izuku family, things were a bit different. Where were you? Dabi questioned. Izuku immediately put on his poker face in response to the impromptu interrogation. Out there, Izuku replied, squaring up his shoulders slightly underneath his hoodie. Doing what? Dabi pressed. Doing things. He made a vague gesture with one hand, before tucking it back into his hoodie. Illegal things. Define illegal things, Izuku bravely replied, face impassive. Dabi briefly exploded in blue flames before extinguishing them a moment later. Izuku, we agreed to keep a low profile for a while. And what you did tonight was anything but low profile, Dabi accused, pointing at him with his finger still faintly smoking. Izuku pretended to be offended for at least half a minute, a hand coming up to clutch his dead heart dramatically. Excuse me. Because I could swear the one going all out and not keeping a low profile was most definitely not me. Izuku stared pointedly at Dabi and tapped his jaw thoughtfully, each tap landing on where a staple would be. Not that I'm complaining. I'm proud of my work. I'm sure it was inconspicuous. Enough. Izuku, I told you not to do illegal things. Don't change the subject. Dabi was starting to smoke again, wisps drifting off his hair and hands. You damn pocket-sized manipulator. Izuku Midoriya opted to do the most adult thing he could think of and stuck his tongue out at Dabi. You're not my mother. It was a blanket statement, but the cold weight of it pressed into the open air. Dabi became exasperated. There were good days, bad days, mixed days, and days like these when Dabi felt like a single teenage mom. And I'm not trying to be. I'm also damn proud you're not like me, you little brat. If you had turned out like me, Japan would be doomed, Dabi ranted. A hand came up to massage his forehead and eyes in a quick scrubbing motion. It dispersed the last of his smoke and he dropped his hand to frown back down at Izuku. The little shit was smiling from ear to ear. Your praise is enough to warm a corpse. Such a phrase, Dabi decided, should not be said from a kid with such malicious glee. Dabi cursed himself, knowing he had just added fuel to his own personal hell. The detective and pro hero were walking down one of the streets in Nagoya early in the morning. They had the whole day ahead of them, especially considering that today All Might would be teaching Class 1A. Both parties agreed to move forward with their new line of investigation, reopening an old case. "Do you think he's still around here?" the detective asked as soon as they arrived at the location, just after getting off the bullet train. The pro-hero grunted in response. He was grumpier than usual that morning because he hadn't received his usual morning dose of affection from his husband. So, now the rest of the universe would have to endure his bad mood. The first victim was Tsukauchi, who, after so many years of knowing each other, decided to make a quick stop at the nearest cafe. If Eraser hadn't said anything during the entire journey, only a coffee with lots of sugar could resurrect him. And, of course, both of them needed to cooperate if they wanted the investigation to proceed. The cafe was moderately busy, and Tsukauchi settled into a secluded booth with Aizawa across from him. The man in question was holding a mug of coffee like it was a lifeline. "I don't know, but at least the family is still here," Aizawa finally spoke after taking a few sips of the hot liquid. The seasoned detective thanked the gods that Eraser's will had returned to his body. "You haven't told me much," Tsukauchi remarked without attacking the pro-hero. "I would appreciate knowing a bit more about the situation before we show up at their doorstep." The hero grumbled again, this time even more reluctantly, as he hated to work without his daily caffeine fix. But he agreed because it made sense that his partner had the information he needed to assist with the interrogation. With the slow pace typical of mornings with a caffeine deficit, Eraser took a folder from his backpack. "This is a closed case already. The disappearance of a teenage girl almost a year ago," Aizawa informed him. "It has the same similarities. Bullying at school, a questionable family environment, and a discriminatory quirk." Tsukauchi took the folder in his hands and opened it for the first time. This case had never reached his ears. He was only a detective, not a god. 𝗃𝗄𝗵𝗃𝗁 read out loud. "Quirk, transformation. She can transform into anyone by drinking their blood." "Oh my god. Do you think this girl is Izuku?" Eraser shrugged in his seat. "It's a possibility. Think logically. 𝗃𝗄𝗵𝗃𝗁 disappeared a year ago, shortly after Izuku Midoriya. Maybe they crossed paths and she saw an opportunity to become someone else." The detective looked at the hero in abject horror. He couldn't understand how Aizawa could talk so calmly about that possibility, especially considering the affection he harbored for Izuku. "Our Izuku wouldn't kill anyone," the policeman defended him. Aizawa glared at him over the cup of coffee before setting it down. "Of course, our Izuku wouldn't do something like that, 𝗃𝗄𝗧. But imagine that he found the body of a boy, someone who didn't go back home and whom he could replace. That's something our Izuku would do." The detective let out a breath that he didn't know he was holding. Izuku could be many things, like a vigilante, a fruit thief, or a library arsonist, but not a murderer. "We still don't know the cause of death of the body on the beach," Tsukauchi pointed out. Aizawa leaned closer to the detective across the table. "Exactly. We don't know if it could have been suicide, negligence, or murder. We don't know because we don't have anything. Yet," the detective emphasized hopefully. "Yet," the hero repeated with certainty. The detective left money on the coffee table. Now he had a clearer direction of where they were headed. Both adults got up from the table and walked side by side. "Any relevant information about the case?" 𝗃𝗄𝗧 asked. "It has a very similar pattern to Izuku's. According to the report, Himiko Toga argued with her parents and went to school. She never returned. The last clothes she was seen wearing were a middle school uniform. She's only a year older than Izuku." The hero handed him a picture of a school with a homeroom class group photo in it. Set apart from the main collective of students was a blonde girl with a small smile. Sharp canines poked out of her smile and her hands were folded in front of her, nearly obscured by the baggy cardigan she had on. Tsukauchi took the photograph and studied the girl's features. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see anything in her that reminded him of Izuku. Eraser. "I don't know, I don't think. Think about it. Maybe that's why it was so hard to find Izuku outside his criminal activities. Perhaps because when he wasn't Izuku, she was being herself. No teenager could have such a wide control of her quirk to use it for hours. She may have run away from home because she couldn't bear the lie forever." The detective cursed in a low, dark voice. Logically, it did make sense after all. However, that didn't mean he liked the idea of an unknown girl pretending to be a dead person. "Do we know how her quirk works?" Eraser shook his head. "No, there isn't much information on that, or on anything specific. And that's why we're here," he said, announcing their arrival in front of a house in a residential neighborhood. "Now, go and do your thing." The detective blinked in disbelief while looking at Eraser, who was relentlessly pointing at the house's entrance. Just above the mailbox, the sign read Toga Family. The detective cursed again. "Why did you make me come if you could do this on your own?" 𝗃𝗄𝗧 accused him. "Because if I go in there alone, I might end up being the one who has to hide a body on that filthy beach," Aizawa said matter-of-factly. "Fair enough." 𝗃𝗄𝗧 could imagine that happening. The detective took a deep breath and composed himself. He rang the doorbell. time to get some answers. 𝗵𝘃𝐤𝐵 walked through the halls of UA with his feet dragging and his hands in his pockets. It was the first few days of the school year, and the students' energy was still evident as they ran enthusiastically around the campus, exploring the place. 𝗏𝗧𝗏 could see how all those extras around him lit up in the presence of the #1 hero. Well, almost all of them. Everyone was excited about their new hero costumes because a glimmer of what they would become if they survived the next 3 years. Something that didn't worry 𝗵𝘃𝐤. You see, 𝗏𝗧𝗏 was, and had always been, a genius. Yes, he had been physically preparing for years to enter the world of heroism. He was determined to be the greatest hero the planet had ever seen. Everyone around him were just extras filling up space. That's what 𝗵𝘃𝐤 really thought. He was someone who had never struggled with getting bad grades. 𝗏𝗧𝗏 was one of those people who understood everything quickly. Well, mathematics, languages, geometry, things with logic and rules. Dealing with people and social integration had never been 𝗏𝗧𝗏's strong suit. He had always been treated like a future leader, admired as some kind of deity with his quirk. Everyone was certain about 𝗏𝗧𝗏's future. Everyone knew where he would end up, except for that stupid nerd. Damn, he was thinking about him again. And thinking about him made his nose hurt. It wasn't a physical pain. His nose had been fixed weeks ago, but his brain didn't get the memo. 𝗏𝗧𝗏 cursed. He should be happy to be at UA, but he wasn't. Because every time he got distracted, he ended up thinking about that damn nerd. Because this year was the first time the school year had started, and Izuku wasn't there. And that was causing something in his chest that he didn't understand and that he hated. That damn nerd had been in 𝗵𝘃𝐤's life since they were toddlers. They had shared every first day of class. And now, for the first time, Izuku Midoriya wasn't in his life, and 𝗵𝘃𝐤 couldn't stop thinking about him. Thinking about that nerd who always sat in class and muttered nonsense. That damn idiot who always seemed to be overexerting himself to try to keep up with others, not realizing he'd never make it. That damn idiot. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 leaned his forehead against the cold metal of the locker. He had reached the changing rooms automatically, following those extras. He held in his hands the hero costume he had always dreamed of, and he couldn't feel anything. In his head, the image of the morgue table with Izuku's consumed body kept repeating. No, he would never have to share a class with the nerd again. And strangely, that made 𝗵𝘃𝐤 nauseous. Hey, dude, are you okay? Someone asked. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 grunted. Of fucking course, I'm fucking perfect. Damn extras trying to take advantage of his moments of weakness. The others decided to leave him alone. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 quickly changed before heading to 𝗏𝐚𝐧𝐻's class. When he arrived at the training ground, the students present were listening to praises from the new teacher about their hero costume designs. Some asked if the class would be different from Aizawa's. A few asked if they would be expelled if they didn't reach a certain score, like the day before. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 just let out one of his characteristic TCH sounds and moved to the back of the class. The idea of expelling students who didn't measure up made it more appealing to him. He was tired of being surrounded by extras. 𝗏𝗧𝗏 had yet to find a worthy rival. We'll have 2-on-2 simulation battles between villains and heroes, 𝗏𝐚𝐧𝐻 announced. 𝗏𝗧𝗏 didn't even smile at the idea of finally being able to beat someone up legally. Among those present, only 3 students remained in the back, observing 𝗏𝐚𝐧𝐻's explanation. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 only had the strength to beat someone, not to endure their social enthusiasm and the like. He wanted to be a hero already, to prove he was the best, not to make friends. To him, he wasn't surrounded by classmates. They were extras. Extras who stood out more than in previous years. Yes, but still extras. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 could already identify that the blonde guy with a lightning bolt on his hair probably had an electricity-related quirk. Or the guy with sticky balls on his elbows. Or the one with multiple arms. Or, well, seeing them all so enthusiastic over a simplistic task made 𝗏𝗧𝗏 want to explode their head. Not that he would do it, but the urge was there. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 was good at analyzing his surroundings. In his eyes, only 2 people stood out at that moment. Like him, only 2 people there didn't seem entranced by 𝗏𝐚𝐧𝐻. Only 2 people apart from him seemed to be on alert, expecting the worst. The candy stick and the round face. Both were silent, separated from the group in different areas. Something in their expressions made 𝗵𝘃𝐤 not want to underestimate them. Not yet. Then we'll start with the hero-villain battle. As heroes, Todoroki Shoto and Toru Hagakure. And for the villains, 𝗵𝘃𝐤 Katsuki and Minato Minoru. TCH, it didn't matter who his partner was. 𝗵𝘃𝐤 would win against the candy cane and the invisible girl alone. He headed towards the simulation building where the bomb they were supposed to protect was located. This exercise is stupid. If 𝗵𝘃𝐤 were in a real situation where they were going to attack him, he would win because there was no other option. Even if he were pushed to his limits to surrender by a large group of heroes, their actions would still lead to his victory. It would be as easy as waiting for the vast majority of them to enter the building and then detonating the bomb with them inside. Because if 𝗵𝘃𝐤 were to go down, he would be taking them down with him. That's just how he was. He had always been that way and it had always worked for him. Stay with the bomb. I'll take care of everything. barked 𝗵𝘃𝗁 as he began to stretch, eager to finally clear his head. It should have been simple. He would defeat them in a matter of minutes. First, the candy cane, then the invisible one. Easy. Incredibly easy. The signal marked the beginning of the exercise. Katsuki would have only. Katsu. Cat. Oh, shit. Before he could realize it, 𝗵𝘃𝗁 Katsuki had been immobilized in a massive ice glacier. 𝗵𝘃𝗁, the one who expected to win in a matter of minutes, had been defeated in seconds. The heroes win. Katsuki wanted to scream or cry. In one part of his mind was the reminder of Izuku, broken and trembling after 𝗵𝘃𝗁 broke his nose. You're not the center of attention, Kaken, furious green eyes judging him. Katsuki was entering an era of realizing that maybe, for the first time, he would have to work hard himself if he wanted to measure up to the rest. It was a horrible feeling that was eating him from the inside. It wasn't just the pain of the cold against his skin or the stiff muscles. No, his ego was critically damaged. On the other side of the room, a brunette smiled hopefully, because maybe with a classmate like Shoto Todoroki, they would be better suited to inherit One for All. She just prayed that All Might would change his decision on his own. Maybe Hitoshi was giving Present Mike the silent treatment. He wanted to, and at the same time, he didn't. Koshi wanted to tell Hisashi that he needed some time to process all the conflicting feelings in his chest, but at the same time, he kept thinking that he could delay 5 more minutes. And 5 more minutes were nothing more than that, just 5 more minutes, which end in a lot of more than just 5 more minutes. Hitoshi ended avoiding all the glances that Present Mike threw his way between classes. At lunchtime, he had avoided the hero who seemed to be looking for him again. Even in the hallways, he noticed Aizawa's gaze coming out of his 1A class. When they had returned home, he had locked himself in his room with the pretext of doing homework. Later, he claimed he wasn't hungry, had homework to do, or that the ceiling was something very interesting to look at. By the time evening came, both adults were quietly chatting in his room about something that Hitoshi was unable to hear. Any anger, stress, or intrusive thoughts were quickly pushed aside by the relentless search for more videos of the man dancing to Unholy on the bar. Before he could realize it, the sun was beginning to rise. That's when Hitoshi knew he had messed up. He hadn't managed to sleep at all. And the worst part was that, no matter how much he searched for videos about the fire user, the ones he found weren't very professional. But Hitoshi was content because he had hope. These videos meant that Izuku wasn't just a figment of his imagination. Somewhere out there was Izuku's homeless friend. And if anyone could know about his best friend, maybe it would be him. For now, he'd just have to grab a coffee and go through his 3rd day of class as if everything was normal, pretending that his dark circles weren't any wider than usual. Perhaps he could take a break during lunchtime and get some rest. Good morning, Hito. Are you okay? Hisashi immediately worried when he saw his face. Hitoshi tried to distance himself, his expression as if he had just licked a lemon. He didn't know how to express himself well, or rather, he feared that they would discover all his fears about being abandoned. Eep, Hitoshi was internally panicking. I'm fine, he hissed before escaping to the bathroom as quickly as he could. Eraser hugged his husband and gave him a tender kiss on the cheek. We'll fix it. We'll talk about it tonight. His blonde husband nodded. Yes, they just had to be patient. And Hitoshi hated that because he had been in similar situations before. In the end, patience only led to more disappointment and more pain. It was better for the pain to come sooner rather than later. At least, Hitoshi survived the awkward morning, where breakfast awaited him as usual. Also, the weird morning classes. When your foster dad is also your teacher, sometimes the lessons could feel weird. Hopefully, the morning classes ended as usually. Perfect time to go and rest. He could deal with hunger later. Sleep, on the other hand, not so much. Not if he wanted to stay awake in the remaining classes. He leaned against the hallway wall and closed his eyes for a moment. Just a second was all it took to fall into Morpheus's embrace. There would be nothing in this universe capable of waking him up. Nothing that. Hey, you can't sleep here. Shinso felt a slight movement on his leg. Nothing he couldn't ignore and continue sleeping. Then the alarms went off. The truth was, even that wouldn't be enough to wake him from his deep slumber. Damn extra. Then something sudden did snap him back to reality. Bewildered and confused, someone had grabbed him by the jacket of his uniform and was dragging him along the hallway. Security alert level 3. Students, evacuate, was echoing in the background. Hitoshi looked around in confusion at the blonde guy pulling him along, expecting to be thrown aside or punched any moment. Only seconds later did he realize that behind him, a horde of students were running uncontrollably through the hallway. Hitoshi felt like he was in a scene from The Lion King. Come on, damn extra. Hitoshi managed to react, trying to get to his feet while stumbling. Shit. Come on, extra, run. Damn it. The blonde guy didn't let go of Shinso's jacket for a moment as he continued pulling him. Shinso ended up grabbing the guy's wrist while trying to make sense of where he was going, why, or what was happening. Hitoshi could only follow the blonde guy as they made their way through the doors to UAS outdoor courtyard. Then both of them stepped aside, allowing the rest of the students to start pouring out. Well, at least they tried to. There was a huge bottleneck in the hallway. Hitoshi sighed with relief as he collapsed on the ground, unable to believe it. In contrast, the blonde guy remained standing, panting. Who the hell decides to sleep in the middle of the hallway? Are you crazy or what? Hitoshi rolled his eyes. Relax, Speaky boy, I didn't plan to feel like Mufasa during lunch break. Anyway, thanks and all. The blonde guy seemed to get even angrier than he already was, especially with his broad shoulders, hunched back, and how he moved like an angry gorilla. Ew, damn extra. You almost died like a. Nah, I'd need something more to kick the bucket. Thanks though. The blonde guy cursed again before leaving Hitoshi lying there. And maybe it was just the press entering the campus, but Hitoshi didn't care. He turned over on the grass and closed his eyes to continue sleeping as if nothing had happened. What's the worst that could happen? Izuku had a lot of free time since he was a ghost. Nothing new in this story. His daily routine before the D-Day when they found his corpse was to watch the sunrise with his body, hide in the old karaoke place where Dabi lived, go to pick up Shinso from school, come back with Dabi, patrol Musutafu, and start over with the sunrise at the beach. But many things had changed. Well, not really. That would be a complete lie. Now, Izuku started his day in the cemetery where his body was buried. Under the name Tauya Todoroki, he continued with his daily routine of walking through Tokyo as a ghost until around noon, which was when Dabi usually woke up. That was when Izuku started annoying the fire user with his presence, accompanying him to the nightclub where, increasingly, Dabi seemed to be flirting with everyone and dancing with his great charisma. Well, it was great to see Dabi having a good time, but the fact was that Izuku had been 14 for over a year and a bit more now. As a somewhat childish 14-year-old boy, he didn't quite enjoy nightclubs as much as the idea of going to beat up really bad people. But he couldn't. He couldn't because he had to keep a low profile. This brings us to Izuku's new hobby, annoying the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Sure, Izuku had his personal reasons. But who cares? He's dead. Haha, anything goes. Let's remember that Izuku is still 14 years old. And his hobby had now led him to be in the bathroom of the number 2 hero while adding salt to his aftershave lotion. He wanted to add dye or something to Endeavor's shampoo too, but that meant taking it from the outside and sneaking it into the house. Too much work for a ghost who couldn't touch things in his invisible state. But the time would come. His pranks were now limited to what he could do with what was available in the house, including adding chili to Endeavor's soap. He was grateful that the Todoroki mansion was large enough for each person to have their own private bathrooms. He could only imagine the accidents that could happen if it weren't. And well, he was discovering a new side of Dabi's life. There were nights when he spent part of the early morning in Dabi's old room, hitting the wall with a tennis ball. Every time Endeavor opened the door, he found nothing but emptiness, just a ball lying on the floor. But that didn't seem to be enough. Not when, on one of those nights with the ball against the wall repeatedly, Dabi's sister showed up. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵. He had learned her name on the first days annoying the family. The girl sat in a corner of the room, her back against the wall, and she cried. She cried uncontrollably in silence. Please, Tauya, if it's you, tell me. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Please, stop. Is it because of Shoto? Is it because of Dad? Why now and not before? Izuku felt bad about himself. The idea of his torment wasn't meant to make the rest of the family suffer, only Enji Todoroki. Is it because Shoto got into UA? Tauya, please, stop. You'll only make Dad angrier and take it out on Shoto. Please, pray for us from the other side. Mom keeps asking about you. She's better, much better. She doesn't think about you being alive as much as before. Now, only on the worst days. Please, take care of us because I don't know how much more I can take. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 confessed with a broken heart. Izuku approached the woman. She had the same eyes as Dabi, but hers were warm and filled with pain, drowned in tears, sobbing silently while biting her forearm so no one else in the house could hear her lament. The ghost became tangible and visible for just a second to wipe away her tears. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 gasped in surprise. But by the time she opened her eyes, there was nothing in front of her. I'm sorry, 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵, Izuku said from his ghostly state, being invisible and incapable of being heard. But I can't stop. I'll save you, I promise. Just wait a little longer. I'll find a way, Izuku promised her. That day, when he got back to the apartment he shared with Dabi, he went straight to hug his older brother. At first, Dabi thought it might be some kind of trap, and that Izuku was just trying to stick something to his back. But in the end, he accepted the hug, strangely comforting his brother. Izuku had a new goal in mind. He would save the Todorokis and make Endeavor bald. Aizawa had just arrived home when he encountered the little disaster in the kitchen. Mike, his beloved and adored husband, is naturally messy blonde hair, especially messy when he was in the kitchen. Don't get me wrong, both of them, the married couple, the eraser Mike, the duo of sexy teachers, both were a disaster in the kitchen. The difference was that Shota usually either burned everything he touched, made it taste bland, or just had laziness and ended up eating jelly pouches. But, oh man, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was another story. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was the creative type. The kind who, when he felt like innovating, overdid it. The last time had been with Izuku. And the poor kid ended up being the little chef responsible for making sure that day nobody ended up in the hospital with gastroenteritis. But now, it was just him in the kitchen. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, are you okay? Did something happen? Aizawa asked. The blonde raised his face, completely covered in chocolate. He had a sad pout that made his eyebrows tremble and his lips quiver. Shota, yes, Shota, 𝗬𝗵𝗲, Aizawa responded, trying to be patient. Shota. The blonde threw himself into his husband's arms. Aizawa rolled his eyes while he picked up his husband. I'm right here. Is this about yesterday? He tried to redirect his husband. The blonde buried his face in his husband's neck. Yes, Hitoshi got angry with me. And now he hates me. Aizawa rolled his eyes, not believing a word. It's not that he didn't trust his husband, but he knew him very well, and he often tended to exaggerate. That's how he knew him, and that's how he fell in love. I don't think that's going to happen, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Tell me what happened, clear and concise. Aizawa didn't expect to be mediating between his husband and their son so soon. In fact, the bets had always been the other way around. Mike used to be the friendlier of the two. Well, not used to, he still was. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was the life of the party. He just got stuck with those who were like Shota, the ones who were consumed inside, kept everything to themselves, and couldn't open up. It's like I told you. He doesn't talk to me. He avoids eye contact with me in class, Shota. He doesn't want to eat. He isn't sleeping. Well, not at night. 𝗵𝗲𝗄s complained that he nodded off in his class. Has Hitoshi talked to you? Because he hasn't to me. What if we're doing it wrong? Shota, what if he thinks we're going to do the same as the other places the poor little listener's been? What if he thinks we don't want him? What if he leaves like Izuku? Mike, stop right there. It's your anxiety talking. Izuku is a special case. I'm working on it. Iyamasa and I are investigating it. Hitoshi is Hitoshi. And Izuku is Izuku. Shota, you weren't there seeing that terrified face when I took his phone. Shota, he was terrified. What if he doesn't want to live with us? Like Izuku, but that part went unsaid. It wasn't necessary. Not between them. Specifically, the night before, Aizawa had been updating his husband on the case. They had an unspoken agreement not to talk about Izuku in front of Hitoshi. Their runaway son's case was between the two of them. Hitoshi had enough on his plate already. But in one thing, Shota was right. Hitoshi wasn't Izuku. If something wasn't working, it needed to change. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, breathe. We'll fix it. Like adults. So start by fixing this whole mess. Aizawa pointed to the general chaos in the kitchen before making his husband let go of his embrace. I'm going to talk to Hitoshi. We'll all discuss it as the family we are. If 𝗧𝗵𝗲 thought he had ever loved Shota with all his heart, at this moment, his heart told him plus ultra and shouted at him that he would marry his husband again in this life and the next and all the lives after that. The blonde wiped his tears away with an infinite affection for his husband before obeying him and starting to clean up the chaos at the kitchen. His insomniac husband gave Mike's shoulder one final squeeze before heading to their children's room. Well, the room of one of their sons. Soon, it would be plural. He knocked gently on the door before opening it. He didn't expect to find Hitoshi there, nervous, with a phone flying between his trembling hands until it ended up in the pocket of his pants. Aizawa looked at a fixed point on the wall for a moment. No, Shota refused to go through the phase where he found his son looking at inappropriate things on his phone. Nope, he wasn't going to go through that. And from Hitoshi's blush, it seemed like his son didn't want to go through it either. So, Shota cleared his throat, as if nothing had happened, and leaned against the door casually. Can I come in? Hitoshi blinked a couple of times before reacting. Yeah, you're already inside. Shota scratched the back of his neck, feeling somewhat uncomfortable. He wasn't the one for words. That was Mike's role. But being in a partnership meant that if one couldn't, the other took over, right? I wanted to talk to you. I know I've been busy lately, and the situation is weird and strange. It must not be easy, but I want you to know that we're here for you, Shota said, slowly approaching where Hitoshi was before sitting next to him on the bed. The room had changed over the 3 months that Hitoshi had been in the house. Now, it had a blanket with constellations. Posters of singers covered the walls, singers that Shota didn't recognize. It wasn't that Hitoshi had a specific and unusual taste. It was just that Shota was a social hermit who didn't care about much. Famous people were included in that list. Hitoshi looked at Shota for a moment before averting his gaze. His father could understand that Hitoshi felt more guilty than angry. Okay. That was his son's super emotional response. Shota tried not to laugh, something that didn't go unnoticed by his son. But how could he not laugh? Hitoshi was too much like his father, so much so that sometimes Shota was strongly tempted to get a paternity test. Are you laughing? No, Aizawa denied, biting his lip to stifle his laughter. Then he took a deep breath to try to be more serious about the situation. I want us to talk and stuff. I mean, as a family. Because it's weird for everyone. Weird doesn't mean bad, the pro-hero hastened to clarify. Just unfamiliar. I'd like you to feel comfortable talking about whatever you need and how you feel. Eraser didn't want to broach the topic of I think I just caught you watching a video of a guy dancing. No, he wasn't ready for that conversation yet. And if his son wanted to tell him he was gay, there wouldn't be a problem. For obvious reasons, slay. He would just wait until his son felt ready for it. Okay. Shota glanced sideways at his son, who seemed more uncomfortable than a cat in a bathtub. That's why I would appreciate it if you told us when you're uncomfortable or if we're doing something that upsets you. We want you to find this apartment a home and as a family. Hitoshi raised an eyebrow skeptically. Is this because of the other day? The phone thing. Aizawa proceeded to mimic his teenage son's responses. Yep, don't say that, the embarrassed teenager complained. You're too old to use that vocabulary. Nope, Aizawa resisted with a sadistic smile popping it. Hitoshi rolled his eyes and playfully shoved his father before grabbing his stuffed cat. The same cat that had been Izuku's idea. Hitoshi squeezed it nervously in his hands. I'm sorry, he said in a whisper. I overreacted. I won't do it again. Hey, no, Toshi. Shota hurried to put his hands on the teenager's shoulders, trying to lift him up. You have every right to explode, to feel overwhelmed. I just mean that you should talk to us so we can change things or understand you. Okay. The teenager took a little while to respond. Sure, yes, sure. Hitoshi sighed, making a face. Yes, Aizawa felt satisfied. He placed a hand on the boy's back, and before he could react, Hitoshi was leaning his forehead against his shoulder. And there they were, in a strange but comfortable half-hug. Shota's chest squeezed with feelings he could recognize as happiness, approval, and more energy than any double coffee. He hugged his son tightly, squeezing him against his chest. Now, please, Shota pleaded, go and make things right with Zashi. Or else we'll all end up with severe gastroenteritis in the hospital, and that's not the family bonding plan I had in mind. Hitoshi laughed at that all-too-accurate comment. No, he didn't have 5 more minutes. The silent treatment was over already. Well, they didn't even have 5 more minutes, given that he could hear an indignant blonde from the other side of the house. SHOTA. Shit, he heard me, he whispered to his son as if he were his accomplice. Child, are you all alone here? Where are your parents? Do you want a sweet? I have a lot of candies in my car. Midoriya raised his head from his position. A second ago he was petting a cat on the street and now there was a tall shadow above him. It should be said that his mother had prepared him many times for that kind of situation. Situations where strangers would offer him drugs, sweets, or anything. The answer was always the same, run away as fast as he could. Well, Izuku Midoriya, instead of screaming and running, smiled like an inoffensive angel and got up from the ground, saying goodbye to the cat with a caress. Yes, I'm alone, Izuku responded in a more childish tone than usual. Do you like lollipops? Izuku nodded in agreement. The man extended his hand and the 14-year-old preteen, shorter than the average Japanese, accepted it. Well, you're going to love everything I have. Come, we are very close. Yep, Izuku popped at the end of the word. Izuku followed him, jumping in happiness in the direction that the man was taking him. Today was a wonderful sunny day perfect for holding hands with a pedophile. Oh, how Dabi was going to be pissed off when or if he told him. No, better not said any word about it. The stranger stood in front of a white regular van with dark windows. Wow, a dark one was more expected. The movies tended to always make them black. What a scam. The man opened the sliding door. I have the sweets right here. Izuku jumped, showing the joy of a child on Christmas morning. Great. He proceeded to get into the car without hesitation. There was a slight confusion on the man's face, as if it were too easy. But you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. He closed the door, and he had the child he wanted. Now it didn't matter how much the child kicked or screamed. The boy had already entered the lion's den. Now he couldn't get out. Or rather, the pedophile was digging his own grave. Izuku lay down on the floor of the truck without eating anything at all. Inside there was a ton of chocolates, gummies, everything. Nothing that got his interest anyway. Izuku became intangible but still visible. He stared at the roof of the van the entire way to wherever they were taking him. The Vigilante was very calm with the idea that day he could break a couple of bones of a sexual predator before handing him over to the police. The truck stopped as soon as it entered the basement of a building on the outskirts of the city. Hey, man, where were you? Izuku heard another voice from his position. Izuku pouted in boredom. He wanted to gossip too. So he became invisible and moved to the front of the van. You know, getting a little dessert, the kidnapper said sarcastically. The new man made a disgusted face. Fuck, how disgusting. Anyway, Fukuoka called. He has been told by a friend who knows a friend that they are asking for people for a super easy job. It's your style, the boy, somewhat younger than the kidnapper, pointed out. It's to beat up some brats. The man rolled his eyes. I want to give them love. A special love. Not just punch them. The man corrected him with a tone. Both Izuku and the new man grimaced in disgust. Oh yes, boy was I going to enjoy breaking that man's bones. Look, dude, it's an easy job. Easy money. Beating up some kids. PFFT. Do they really need that many people for that? The man in the window grimaced uncomfortably with the kidnapper. Whatever, I'm going. I'll leave in half an hour with or without you, he said before slamming the car door in farewell. The man muttered something about young people being disrespectful before starting the car to finish parking. Izuku watched as the man parked and put on gloves, all so calmly, as if he had done it so many times before, opening the glove compartment and pulling out a taser. Oh, Izuku thought to himself. So, that's how he prevents kids from screaming when he transports them from place to place. The man left the taser on the seat for a moment while he looked for some zip ties in the same place he had taken the weapon. We've arrived at the candy factory, kid. Are you still awake? Izuku became visible and tangible again, grabbing the taser quickly. Yes, you son of a bitch, wide awake, he said before pressing the taser against the man's neck. He pressed the button once, twice, 3 times. Well, he kept pressing the button until the man, after convulsing, stopped moving altogether and fell unconscious on the steering wheel. Izuku quickly moved him back to avoid any noise. He grabbed the zip ties and tied the man's wrists tightly until they turned red. Izuku looked disappointed at the man. It had been too easy. He didn't know if the man was inept or if Izuku had just had a lot of practice by now. Either way, Izuku wasn't very satisfied. He took the man's phone and unlocked it with his fingerprint. 911, what's your emergency? Izuku got into character again, using his childlike voice. Hello. I need help. A man put me in the back of his van. Please, help. Hell. And he hung up the phone and put it in the man's pocket, patting him on the head. Sleep well, dirty pig. They'll get you soon. If not, I'll come back for you and break every bone in your body. Now, I have to go see what your friend is up to. Well, yes, today Dabi was going to kill him as soon as he found out. Well, maybe if Izuku never told him any of that, he wouldn't find out, right? Right. Yes, Izuku was an optimistic type, and with his optimism, he followed the man he had seen earlier. The accomplice. Let's see what they were planning with beating up children. Izuku would have to teach them some manners, and he would be happy to do so. Aizawa had been a teacher at UA for several years already. One of the intensive lessons he liked to give at the beginning of the semester in the first year took place at the USJ. It was a rescue-based training, perfect for bringing down the overconfident kids who were eager to fight and be heroes. No, the first lesson always had to be about evacuation and the various protocols for saving civilians. That's what the USJ field trip was for. What he didn't expect to happen was turbulence in the air that opened a portal. Of course, among all the quirks a villain could have, teleportation was one of the rarest, most unique, and dangerous ones. And, of course, a villain had to possess it. Attacks on UA were not common but not impossible either. It had happened before. That's why the school had a high security system that allowed only those with proper credentials to enter. That's also why, when they ventured off campus, they always went out in groups of 3 heroes for a group of 20 students. Hold on, those are real villains. But right there were only 2 heroes in a vast and open area to cover, and about 19 inexperienced fledglings who were nothing more than cannon fodder. 13. Protect the students. Aizawa wasn't going to let any of them get hurt. Eraser put on his yellow goggles, and his weapon, the capture scarf, began to glide around him. The large group of villains received the order from their leader to attack. Eraser was not in a good position right now. He was a hero who relied on stealth and catching opponents off guard. But the ones caught off guard were them, the good guys. First rule of the hero world, things rarely went as planned, but they had to continue anyway. That's what the professional did. Put aside the desire to go home to his husband and son to do his duty and protect the kids, because those brats, those teenagers, had families to return to. Eraser would give his all to make sure those kids, who played at being heroes in those silly and uncomfortable costumes, made it out safe and sound. Aizawa prepared to fight tooth and nail until help arrived. It could be 5 minutes or 5 hours. He had to hold out, fighting by hitting anyone who came at him, hitting more than one at a time, moving as if he were dancing, agilely weaving through his opponents while ensnaring them with his capture scarf, pulling them to the ground, trying to strike at the areas he knew would weaken his opponent easily. And when he finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel after so many low-tier villains, reality hit him like a truck. Well, more like in the form of a semi-adult addicted to video games with significant nutritional deficiencies according to his scrawny build and with a severe utopian dermatitis from how he scratched his neck, probably in need of a shower and a lot of moisturizer. 3, 2, 1. Even though the pain shot up inside his bone to his neck when the villain began disintegrating his elbow, Eraser didn't scream. The next thing happened very quickly. He had gotten his hopes up too quickly with the idea that he could control the area for the necessary time. Hope was a bitch. By the way, hero, I'm not the final boss, warned Shigaraki, pointing to the strange black beast with a beak and an open skull. the same size as All Might. For one endlessly long second, Shota saw that he wouldn't make it to his retirement. Eraser didn't have time to analyze before that monstrous thing tried to grab him. It wasn't in Eraser's skill set to defeat a monstrous creature if he couldn't erase its quirk. And so far, Eraser had never been able to erase a mutation quirk like the strange individual seemed to have. Eraser was willing to die if it meant his students would survive. He was prepared to die fighting. What he wasn't prepared for was to hear a sharp scream of pain cutting through the entire atmosphere of the USJ Plaza. A scream very similar to that of a desperate little girl. Except that there were no kids under 15 there, right? Right, of course not. Well, technically, yes and no. Because that scream came from the 𝗳𝗵𝗲 villain, tearing in pain because hanging from his back was a figure that Shota Aizawa recognized very well. He recognized him very well. About 5 feet tall, male, gray sweatshirt and blue pale jeans, a mane of unruly green hair, and 100% a problem child. Shota was left breathless. After more than 3 months of searching, there he was, his problem child, hanging onto Shigaraki, or rather, biting Shigaraki's shoulder with force, making him bleed from the bite. And Aizawa screamed as he saw that monster approaching his child, instinctively activating his quirk. But as always, the boy didn't disappear. And luckily Shigaraki's hands touched Izuku to throw him away or disintegrate him. However, the villain's quirk never got a chance to activate, so he only managed to get the boy off him and throw him to the ground. Well, Eraser, so cool. But your quirk won't be able to do anything against my Namu. Namu, kill the kid. Izuku, who had rolled on the ground, stood up before he could even hear how fast the Namu was approaching. Aizawa's heart stopped for a moment when he saw that the monster charging at his child. Izuku. Aizawa had experienced countless losses in his life, with Oboro being one of the most impactful. It had torn him apart for years, but he never would have imagined that there could be a worse pain than that, until that moment when all he could see was the monster. At that moment, Shota couldn't think about anything else. The rest of the USJ seemed to have gone silent around him. The sounds were completely muted. He couldn't even hear 13 or the other students, not even Shigaraki's laughter. No, at that moment, blood drained from Shota's face as he imagined Izuku's body lying on the ground, bloodied by the impact, unconscious and motionless, as pale as a beach corpse. For a moment, Shota swore that his heart had stopped beating. Then, in the next moment, a lively Izuku went through that monster as if it were a wall, just as he always did, with a cocky smile while he looked at that thing called Namu. Wow, I was wondering earlier, are you sure this is a person? The boy asked as if it were a class. Then their gazes met. Izuku's green eyes were tinged with embarrassment. Oh, hi, Eraser. It's been a while. He will kill him. Eraser was going to kill him. Oh, yes, as soon as that attack was over. He was going to kill him and then resurrect him and take him home. But for the moment, Shota couldn't help but cry from relief at seeing his child safe. Izuku, but whose kid is this? Shigaraki complained, trying to catch the boy without success. His hands only found nothing every time he tried to disintegrate in vain. What kind of trick are you using? Are you one of those random heroes in training? Izuku then turned his attention to the villain. He seemed hurt. I came with you. The boy falsely complained. It's not my fault you take in anyone and treat them like stupid pawns. Then don't complain if someone turns their back on you and bites you. Literally was unsaid. The semi-adult got angry and launched as many attacks as he could without even touching anything, getting even more frustrated by each try. By the time Shigaraki got tired of seeing the boy doing nothing with his hands in his pockets, he was already panting. In contrast, the boy, as soon as the villain stopped to catch his breath, delivered a precise punch to Shigaraki's entire nose. Even Aizawa could hear the sound of Shigaraki's nose cracking from a distance. The Namu lunged to protect its master. Unfortunately, just like Shigaraki, it couldn't do anything when the boy disappeared. Kurogiri, he broke my nose. The stupid kid broke my nose. Shigaraki screamed like a little child, even though there was no Kurogiri nearby to assist him. Aizawa was still in shock, unable to react. His child had been there, just a few meters away from him, and now, PSSSSSS, Eraser, Izuku's voice whispered behind him. The boy was curled up behind him as if he was trying to avoid being seen by the villains. Before I came, I already warned the police. Hold on a bit longer, please. Hold on for Zashi and Toshi. And for me. Oh, Eraser was going to strangle him with a loving hug. He was sure of that. The boy disappeared again as the pro hero nodded. Shigaraki continued to rant and rave. Oh, come on, it's just a nose, Izuku told him, appearing again on the Namu's shoulders. Hey, can this thing think for itself? The Namu tried to shake the teenager off in vain. Instead, Izuku patiently waited for the creature to stop trying to attack him, and then he put a finger into its brain. He didn't know what to expect from that gesture, but barely 2 seconds later, he was standing to the side, suffering from disgust at having touched something viscous, wet, hot, and soft. If anyone cared about the Namu, The poor hybrid had regenerated super quickly. Haha, you can't beat my Namo. It's the perfect creation to defeat All Might. Izuku, still on all fours, feeling nauseous, looked at the villain as if he were stupid. Let me get this straight. The green-haired boy swallowed hard to keep his nausea in check and stood up, regaining his composure. You created a killing machine with extra strength and regeneration to kill All Might, and you decided to attack a school with low-tier villains to kill All Might. Are you dumb or? That didn't seem to sit well with the villain. Aizawa got up, sweating and holding his arm against himself. Just a few minutes earlier, Shigaraki had tried to disintegrate him. But now, any pain became insignificant if Izuku was involved. Damn NPC, who do you think you are? You pretended to be part of my party. Izuku shook his head. He was trying to buy time, and Aizawa had to admit that he was too good at it. Terrifyingly good. Yes, Eraser was used to Izuku's vigilantism activities, but those villains were on a whole different level. Well, no. I snuck in and followed you here. I was curious, the boy admitted with an innocent and childlike voice. The plan was a bit absurd since the first moment. Well, wait. He turned to Eraser as if he suddenly remembered the adult was there, fixing his gaze on him. I snuck into their meeting when I was following a suspect who was friend with a pedophile. But all good, he gave context to the pro-hero, showing that he really cared whether Eraser believed he was part of the villains. And, the plan is pathetic, he said, addressing the villain again. You want to attack the number one hero when there are 2 other heroes on the scene and about 20 students. That's basic math. Shiggy, he took liberties to scold him. A pro-hero can handle more than several good-for-nothings. Not to mention that even the students are beating your minions up. You can't just pick anyone. Besides, paying a hefty sum. I don't know what surprises me more. That nearly 100 people fell for it, or that you weren't afraid they'd turn on you. And that caught the attention of several villains who were lying on the ground. They didn't understand the teenager, but his way of speaking captivated anyone as if he had full confidence. My plan is perfect. Shiggy stomped his foot like a child. What do you mean? One of the villains asked, sitting up among groans. Izuku ignored the man-child and turned to the crowd of semi-conscious villains thanks to Eraserhead. He's going to leave you hanging. He never intended to pay you. Probably his escape plan is to leave you behind and get away with that purple cloud over there. The little gremlin dropped the spoiler, pointed to the entrance where the cloud villain was fighting against 13. Shigaraki gasped in surprise. Now you're spoiling my plans. What are you, a hidden mini-boss? Izuku sighed as if he were tired of dealing with the Hands villain. Yikes, I'm 5'3", not a mini-boss. I'm Izuku. I'm more of a joker, I'd like to say. And, suggestion. Before involving innocent kids who have nothing to do with your nonsense, I'd try attacking the number one hero in his home while he sleeps. I don't know, it would be much more effective than at a hero school with, well, heroes and all. As 𝗂𝐸𝐜𝐸. Eraser scolded him, exasperated. The boy cursed when he saw the man-child raise his gaze, acknowledging Shota's existence once again. The villain's twisted smile didn't please either of them, father and son. Maybe I can't attack you, but I can certainly put an end to that hero you admire so much, can't I, mini NPC? Izuku moved with determination to stand between Shigaraki and Eraser. If you do, nothing will stop me from sticking my finger in your brain like I did with the Namo. The boy threatened in low voice, his gaze as serious as Eraser had ever seen. I doubt you both share the regeneration quirk. Not when you're still bleeding from the nose. And it's just as crooked. Judging by the contorted expression on Shigaraki's face, Izuku knew he had hit the mark, and that made the boy smile from ear to ear, happy to be recognized for his abilities. Well, let's leave Izuku and his distorted realities aside, while there was a villain having a tantrum in the background. It's not fair. He's cheating. SENSEIDI didn't talk about a mini-boss. Izuku didn't even bother to dodge Shigaraki and his murderous hands. No one could reach him if the vigilante didn't want to be reached. And by the time Shigaraki tried to pass through Izuku to get to Eraser, the boy grabbed him by the hood and threw him far away with all his strength. It was like seeing a kitten held by the neck, but instead was a preteen scolding a semi-adult. Moreover, the Namo, no matter how hard it tried to defend its master, had the same problem as him. Izuku was unattainable. Literally, it looked more like a scene from a comedy than a serious fight. Eraser, with a bleeding brow, was struggling to control his uncontrollable tic. Ew, Shigaraki complained, but his raspy voice faded into the background when a melodic and soft voice sounded. The Beach Boy. Izuku got distracted from his own fight. There was something about those words that made him react as if they were shouting his name. But there she was, a girl dressed entirely in pink in a galactic outfit. Izuku could clearly see 13's influence on the costume choices. Peach girl, Izuku muttered. Izuku, don't get distracted, Eraser yelled, fearing that the boy would end up in the hands of the villain. Shigaraki lunged at Izuku from behind, stumbling. It was a strange sensation for both of them, especially frustrating for the villain, but it presented a golden opportunity to get closer to Eraserhead again. Izuku often got distracted in battle, admiring the movements and skills of his opponents. Usually, nothing happened because he was the only one present, Izuku and his unstoppable ghost quirk. But this time was different for obvious reasons. The equation was completely different from what he usually did as a vigilante in the area. So far, Izuku had only intervened when Eraser was in danger. He had wanted to be a silent guest at that party, fighting in secret against villains or being the guardian angel of the teenagers, like a stealthy ninja without anyone seeing him. But Izuku never got what he wanted, and now he was in the middle of the fight. Not only in front of Eraserhead's eyes, but also in front of students. There were students there, living students who could stop being alive very easily. Something Eraser understood better than Izuku, given how quickly he reacted when Shigaraki's pet moved toward his student. Izuku had always been a big fan of Eraserhead since he first met him, but it was in moments like these that Eraser reminded him why he was such a fan. While Izuku was distracted, Eraser turned his body to kick Shigaraki while his capture scarf enveloped the 𝗵𝗲. Even with all his strength, Eraser couldn't stop that creature, but the pain in Eraser's voice made the monster react quickly, turning to protect its master. Izuku could hardly react. He barely realized what was happening around him, with everything moving so fast. The monster turned swiftly in its path, slamming into Eraser. "Zawa!" someone shouted. No, Izuku shouted, but his brain couldn't even process it. There, on the ground, was Eraser, bleeding as if he had just been hit by a truck. Izuku had to get that creature off Eraser before it moved again. Before it struck him again. The ghost ran towards Shigaraki and punched him in the jaw, causing the dead hand he held to be thrown aside and throwing the villain to the ground. The monster stood still, awaiting its master's orders, except that this time, its master was too preoccupied to react. Not when Izuku was on top of him, straddling Shigaraki and continuing to punch him repeatedly. Izuku grabbed the fallen hand and quickly slammed it into the villain's face. "Bad boy, you're terrible. You don't deserve anything good," Izuku shouted without thinking as he continued to pummel Shigaraki's face with the dead hand as if he were challenging the villain to a French duel. "You don't deserve me to stop," Izuku screamed on top of the villain. "You, brat, I'll end you," Shigaraki screamed from the top of his lungs. Izuku continued to hit him relentlessly, blind from the anger. "Brat, you're hardly older than me. I'll kill you all." At that threat, something snapped in Izuku's head. Without even having time to think, he shoved the dead hand into the villain's mouth, silencing him. Izuku couldn't bear to hear more obscenities coming out of that foul mouth. Death was not something to be taken lightly, and Izuku knew it all too well. Death was a permanent state, something not to be threatened so casually. Not to the ones that still alive. In one of their struggles, Shigaraki, the villain, managed to push Izuku away from him, sitting on the ground. Izuku quickly got back on his feet, ready to pounce on the villain with relentless energy. But the villain raised his hand, trying to create some space between them. "If you attack me again, I'll tell the 𝗵𝗲 to kill the girl or the pro hero. You can't touch me, but you can't split yourself, can you?" Izuku spat on the ground, furious like a rabid animal. "If you do anything stupid, I swear I'll turn your brain into gruyere cheese," he reiterated his previous threat. The villain seemed to give a confident smile, even though his opponent was a 14-year-old kid. Shigaraki didn't see him as a child but as a hidden character. For a long moment, they stared at each other in a silent battle, until a loud crash shattered that false stillness. "Fear not, for I am here. Oh, there is all might." And no, he wasn't smiling. "Finally, you show your face. 𝗵𝗲, kill him." Both colossal masses collided in the middle of the plaza, creating a gust of wind. Izuku no longer mattered to the villain. Not when the main target just arrived, late, as always. And the young vigilante no longer saw the villain as a problem because there was something that terrified him even more. He turned pale. Izuku paled upon seeing the symbol of peace right in front of him. So he did the best thing he knew and vanished as quickly as he could. Izuku disappeared like a coward, leaving Shigaraki and the 𝗵𝗲 at the mercy of the #1 hero. He turned invisible, feeling that everything around him was either moving too fast or too slow, drowning out all sound as both behemoths collided with each other, crashing into each other. Izuku only reacted when his eyes met the motionless body of Izawa. Izawa, how could he ever look Hisashi in the face again? How could he when his husband was bleeding out on the ground in the midst of a titan's battle? Though, Izuku needed to do something. He forced himself to put one foot in front of the other until he found himself falling to his knees next to Eraser's motionless body. He became visible and tangible and couldn't hold back his sobs any longer, collapsing while hugging his almost adoptive father. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, you have to hold on. You have to hold on and get home to Zashi and Toshi," the boy begged amidst his tears. He seemed to have lost all his courage in an instant. He cried, sobbed uncontrollably, hugging Eraser with all his strength, drowning in his own tears. He couldn't lose Shota. He couldn't shatter another family because he got distracted. He couldn't do that to Toshi and Zashi. "Zashi," Eraser's hand rested on the boy's head. "It takes a lot more to kill me, problem child. The hero talked with a rasped voice for the effort of fight for being conscious. Eraser. The boy whimpered, hugging him even tighter despite his protests. If I knew I had to get hit to see you, I would have done it a lot sooner, the teacher admitted with a tone much warmer than any of his students could ever imagine hearing. Zawa, don't say that. Not even as a joke, the boy protested while sniffing. Eraser tenderly and delicately caressed the boy's cheek, as if he feared the boy might disappear completely. Izuku lent himself to the soft touch of the pro-hero. I've been searching for you like crazy. How are you? Have you been eating well? You know you can always come back home. We're waiting for you, Izuku. Toshi and Zashi are waiting for you. That completely squeezed Izuku's heart. Just the thought of going back and reuniting with his family. That loud blonde who looks like he sings in the shower. With Toshi hugging Sushi on the sofa, making a blanket fort for the two of them. But that wasn't for Izuku. No, that was for the living. And Izuku wasn't alive. I'm fine, Izuku promised, breaking into even more bitter tears. You have to stop looking for me. Please stop. It's the best for everyone, he pleaded with his heart in his hand. Izuku, Eraser's one good hand interlocked fingers with the boy's disheveled hair, pushing him closer. Everything will be okay, Eraser promised him. Everything will be okay. Izuku sobbed deeply on the hero until a warm hand landed on his back. Beach boy, sensei, we're going to help you, the girl promised. In an instant, Eraser's weight disappeared, floating in front of him. Yet, Izuku refused to let go of the hero as if his life, or lack thereof, depended on it. Hey, kid, I know you're scared, Uraraka assured him. But we need to get you out of here. All Might can't fight properly if he's protecting both of you. Izuku, with the battle behind him, cared very little about its outcome. Not when Aizawa was hurt. Not when someone he cared about was in danger. But unfortunately, the voice of reason in his head told him that the girl was right, and he reluctantly let go of Eraser, hoping she would take him far away. Far from death and toward life. Eraser held on tightly to his hand. Don't let go of me, problem child. I won't let you go. Izuku smiled sadly and wiped his tears away with the back of his hand. It's not like you ever had a choice, Eraser. And true to his nature, Izuku began to vanish while in the distance. A loud boom followed by a DEKU was heard. But by the time the explosive blonde reached his teacher, his childhood friend had dissipated into the air. Moments later, a troop of pro-heroes stormed the facility, securing the area. The villain's plan had failed spectacularly. Itoshi was in his physics class when he realized that something was amiss. While trying to solve the problem of two trains, one departing from Kyoto at 275 km per hour and the other from Tokyo at 320 km per hour. All the students were immersed in their exercises following the beginning of term review when the alarm sounded throughout the school. To all faculty members, please report to the teacher's lounge immediately. There are no flourishes in the message as the principal usually liked. No introductions regarding his mysterious animal origins. Nothing of that sort. It was a short and concise message that left the teachers bewildered. Not as much as the students, who remained puzzled and continued with their tasks, except for some. Little by little, students began to whisper to each other until a student from the third-year hero course appeared in each class just 10 minutes before all the teachers had left. Supposedly, they were there to ensure that everyone stayed silent and focused on their work. Hitoshi couldn't help but frown and feel suspicious of having 𝗵𝗃 himself seated in the teacher's chair while answering questions like the senpai he was. No, Hitoshi didn't buy it. It was too strange. So instead, he took out his phone and opened the chat with his now adoptive parents. Is everything okay? 1540 Shota. 1543 Zashi. 1552 There was no response, and a chill ran down his spine freely. Amid the laughter and attempts by his classmates to get the senpai's attention, Hitoshi got up from his seat, trying to blend in with his classmates to reach the door. It was very presumptuous of him to think he could slip past a third-year hero student, especially one of the big three from UA. Get back to your seat. You need to finish the homework, the senpai ordered, with a cheerful smile. I've already finished my assignments, the teenager responded in a monotone voice. 𝗵𝗃 put a hand on his shoulder, guiding him back to his seat. Then take this opportunity to review. It will be good for you, he said, overly optimistic. Obviously, Hitoshi put up resistance. No, he was stubborn. This would be a battle of titans. I need to go to the restroom, the teenager claimed. You can wait, the senpai retorted. Hitoshi began unconsciously tapping his leg. No, I can't. Yes, you can. Go back and sit down, the hero student ordered. Ugh, being given orders was something that Hitoshi didn't take well. Is that what you want? Yes. Hitoshi flashed a sly smile as he had one of the most promising students at UA under his thumb. His quirk could take on titans if necessary. He might be a weakling in comparison, but Hitoshi was much smarter. Let me go, and continue doing your job, forgetting about me leaving. 𝗵𝗃's grip weakened, and without anyone else noticing, Hitoshi left the classroom while 𝗵𝗃 continued speaking loudly about his experiences at UA. great adventures since the first year and a lot of anecdotes about him being naked in front of all students. The hallways were empty. In each classroom, one or more final year students stood out among the younger ones. It was clear that they had given orders to the senior students to monitor the classes, not as senpais but as licensed heroes. And there was only one reason why all the heroes had disappeared from a school filled with them. Something bad had happened. Toshi made his way to the teacher's lounge. Most first-year students usually ignored where the teacher's lounge was at the beginning of the school year. In fact, that was usually a good sign. But that rule did not apply to the children of teachers. Oh, Hitoshi had a mini panic attack when he realized he was now the son of 2 teachers. Oh, how embarrassing it could be if someone found out. Well, he wasn't there to make friends anyway. He already has Izuku, if he ever decides to show up. Hitoshi wasn't standing in front of the teacher's lounge to embarrass himself or turn as red as a tomato just for nothing. Nor was he there to realize that he was still getting used to being someone's child. No, Hitoshi was there because his parents had stopped communicating with him. And even if Hitoshi wasn't sure if his placement was something permanent or rather temporary, just for 4 more years until he came of age, Hitoshi knew that, for the time being, things were going too well. But everything usually had an expiration date. Hitoshi was starting to fear the worst, something that gained momentum when he opened the door to the teacher's lounge and found it completely empty. Had a serious attack happened in the city? That would explain why they need so many heroes at once. Blue and red lights caught his attention from the window. Police cars were parked at the entrance to UA, blocking the entrance. Hitoshi approached the window, pressing his nose against the glass, and saw Lunch Rush and one of the many robots of the principal talking to some officers. Both appeared to be conversing calmly at the gates, while the press seemed to disperse thanks to the presence of the police. Hitoshi noticed one particular police officer, Cathead. No, Hitoshi didn't remember the name of the police officer. Hitoshi remembered him from when Cathead had taken him home after a detective had pointed a gun at him. He also remembered seeing that same officer when a racer rescued him from his previous foster home. To all students, a robotic voice began over the PA system. Classes have been cancelled. Please exit the classrooms and return home directly. Thank you. Hitoshi moved quickly, reaction as fast as he could. Something had happened, and if there was anyone there who could answer his questions, it would be the only faculty member. Hitoshi saw himself going down the stairs, trying to get ahead of all the other students. He attempted to advance through the crowd of students until he managed to get to the entrance. As he had suspected, yes, Lunch Rush was already surrounded by curious students. Come on, keep going, straight home, the hero encouraged everyone who stopped. Hitoshi elbowed his way through. But as something happened, a red-haired girl with a ponytail insisted, "In my younger days, if the school canceled classes, we'd run home. Come on, get going. Go out, go out." Lunch Rush pushed the group toward the exit again. Hitoshi planted his feet and grabbed the hero's forearm, frantic. "Do you know anything about Aizawa or Hazashi?" Wait, the hero restrained himself from denying. For a moment, he seemed a bit confused, but Hitoshi could see the light in his face as he connected the dots. He knew the exact moment when the hero put 2 and 2 together. Are you the kid who likes fruit sushi? Never before had Hitoshi turned so red, up to his ears. Well, there were other times, yes, but none that didn't involve a green-haired person. There was no need to answer the question. Lunch Rush took his arm and pulled him aside. "Stay here for a moment." Hitoshi nodded and stood to the side as students chatted with each other. They talked about meeting at the arcades, the last history lesson, or excitedly discussed how lucky they were to leave early. It was torture to see them all walk away so carefree. Finally, the seniors from the hero program left. They exited as a team, clearly distinct from the other students heading home. "We've checked the classrooms," chirped a girl with long blue hair. "No one is left." Although Tamaki had trouble getting a girl out of the lab, added another senior student. The latter in question hid his face against the back of a taller student, the same one who had been in Hitoshi's class. The same student who carried Hitoshi's backpack with his jacket hanging from it. "Oh, and I accidentally let a student." "Oh, there he is. Hi, I have your things." Hitoshi nodded uncomfortably and approached to retrieve his backpack. He didn't say anything. Not a thank you, not an apology, nothing at all. It was a strange situation between a visibly uncomfortable person and another who smiled as if they were immune to bad weather. Lunch Rush decided to lighten the mood and took Hitoshi under his wing again. "Well, you can all go home. Thanks for your help, guys." The students nodded, and after a brief exchange of words, Hitoshi finally turned to face the retired hero. He needed answers, and he needed them now. "I want to know what's going on and where Aizawa and Yamada are," the student demanded. The hero turned to look at Officer Sansa, not knowing what to expect from the officer. He only twitched an ear, but Hitoshi could see the light go on in his face as he spoke. "I'm Officer Sansa. We've met before." They introduced himself again. "There has been an attack in the faculty. We are investigating it. We will inform you as soon as we have news. For now, it would be best to wait in the immediate vicinity." The other students have already been informed that their parents are waiting for them. Hitoshi furrowed his brow. So, because I don't have parents waiting for me at home, I'm not supposed to leave. The silence was enough of an answer for Hitoshi. He was frustrated with the lack of information, as if he didn't have a right to know anything. It felt as if they were saying that Hitoshi wasn't really part of the family, just a facade that would eventually come to an end. We need to make sure you'll be safe. Hitoshi adjusted his backpack grumpily. I'll be safe, thank you, he said irritably and started walking. The hero and the police officer tried to stop the teenager from leaving, blocking his path. You can't go. Why? Hitoshi asked, infuriated by the situation. Hitoshi just wanted to be alone with his thoughts. Maybe have a bubble tea. Perhaps cuddle with a cat. Maybe kick a trash can. Perhaps spend time in the library until closing time. Well, if someone hadn't burned it down months ago. Maybe one of those 24-hour cyber cafes. Hitoshi wasn't sure if he had money enough, but in worst cases he had been. Because you're the child of pro heroes. You're a possible target. Besides, we're waiting for news. The feline officer responded very formally. An eraser and Mike would kill us if we let you go without protection, added Lunch Rush with pure sincerity. Never before had a response from a stranger made Hitoshi's chest feel so warm. It was as if he could actually believe the lie the adults were telling him. As if he truly mattered to someone and it wasn't all a falsehood. Hitoshi was forced to sit on a bench while Sansa received a call. Much later, he was getting into one of the patrol cars, heading in an unknown direction. At this point, Hitoshi didn't bother asking. It was better to listen to music on his headphones, drowning out the outside world. It was a surprise when the police car stopped at the emergency room entrance of the hospital. By the time he got out of the car, Hitoshi no longer knew what to think. He couldn't think. Why were they taking him here? Why? What if something had happened to Hitoshi? Arms surrounded him before Hitoshi could realize what was happening, hugging him tightly to his father's chest, squeezing him as if he truly cared. There was present Mike, no, Zashi, hugging Hitoshi tightly, repeatedly kissing the top of his head as if he were a small child. It was at that moment that Hitoshi knew it wasn't a facade. No, it wasn't. It couldn't. Zashi, wait. Hitoshi complained like an embarrassed child receiving sudden attention from a parent, even though he made no resistance to the hug. What happened? Present Mike cupped Hitoshi's face in his hands, as if making sure he was safe and sound. It made no sense to Hitoshi, who had spent his entire day inside UA. There was an attack at the school. Sho is in surgery right now. The news hit the boy deep, as if a knife had been thrust into his stomach. But he's okay. His life isn't in danger, Zashi hastily added. They're fixing his arm. Don't worry, everyone is fine. 13 is also under observation. At last, Hitoshi felt like he could breathe. Aizawa was okay. Aizawa was fine, and so was Hisashi. Everyone was fine. Hisashi hugged his son again. This time Hitoshi hugged him back. The last time Izuku was in a hospital was to steal a corpse. However, there he was, back in the same hospital but in a completely different section. One near the morgue, yes, but nothing to do with death. This time, it was about life. Next to the operating room area was the recovery room, where every patient who came out of surgery ended up. There, in one of the beds, lay a man with a cast on his right arm and bandages over his face. Nothing that couldn't be cured with a couple of kisses from recovery girl or a couple of weeks of actual rest. Rest was for the weak in Shota's mind. He would never be willing to do it, not in a million years. But, to prevent the pro-hero from running out the window as soon as he woke up, his guardian angel was there. Izuku stood at the foot of the bed, watching the man sleep peacefully. Hours ago, Izuku had told himself that he should return to Tokyo. Just like when he turned invisible in the USJ. If he had been smart and practical, Izuku would have gone back with the villains, saving himself the trip to Tokyo. But he didn't. Izuku stayed with Aizawa, watching as Hisashi held his hand while paramedics transferred him to the ambulance. Shota repeated over and over that Izuku had been there. His Izuku. The heart of the former or attempted former vigilante squeezed when he heard the happiness in the pro-hero's voice. Or when Mike, between tears, nodded without knowing whether his husband's words were true or not. Not that he believed his husband would lie, but Hisashi feared that their reunion was the result of a head injury. Izuku might have let them go in peace together. But no, he got into the ambulance. He could have left the hospital when Eraser was in surgery. But no, someone had to stay with Shota when Zashi wasn't there, because the numerous medical professionals were not prepared to deal with an Eraser as a patient. That's what Izuku told himself. It's not as if the middle team of the private wing of heroes hadn't already become accustomed to difficult patients. No, Izuku decided to stay. Fufufufu, 𝐳𝗍𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴 were the first words Aizawa said when he regained consciousness. 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 in for a moment to check that the pro hero was still in bed. He raised an eyebrow and then turned without giving it more importance. That made Izuku a bit angry. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, the papers. As soon as Eraser tried to sit up in his bed, ready to pull out the IV from his arm, Izuku lunged at him to prevent it. Bad Eraser. Eraser needs to rest. He pushed him back onto the mattress. The pro-hero fell silent, looking at the child as if he were considering whether what he saw was a result of the painkillers. Problem child. The latter cursed under his breath. To sleep. Go back to sleep, Izuku ordered like he was command a dog. Well, he tried to order, but all the nervousness seeped through his voice. With Shota's good hand, he caught his child and pushed him onto his aching chest. What were a couple of broken ribs compared to the boy he had been looking for so long? No. Bad Eraser, Izuku muttered, opposing a total of 0%. Don't blame him too much. The warmth of Shota, the affectionate hug, the way he pushed him against his chest, placing his hand on his back and gently caressing between his shoulder blades. Oh, no, his father had never done anything like that to Izuku in his life. No, never. But there was Shota, putting his cracked lips on his forehead. Izuku allowed himself to close his eyes for a moment. Oh, if only time could stop right at that moment. My child. Eraser already had a child. And that wasn't Izuku. He couldn't take Hitoshi's place. Hitoshi was already his son and he was nobody. Izuku was nobody. Not that Izuku was being jealous of Hitoshi. Nothing about that. He was happy for his boy. Friend. Well, his important person. Hitoshi deserved to being loved and Izuku pray for the same thing, but the little detail of being dead. No, Izuku couldn't. Eraser, I have to go. And you have to sleep and recover. The pro-hero shook his head. No, I refuse. You're my problem child. Izuku rolled his eyes. It had been easy to forget that his paternal figure was drugged to the gills. Zawa, you have to close your eyes. And sleep. The pro-hero shook his head again. No, I can't. Not until Zashi brings me the papers. Eraser rolled his eyes. Of course, a hero, even in his worst condition, would be thinking about paperwork. Damn it, Eraser. It's not a time for work, Eraser. It's time to sleep. No one is going to bring you any paperwork. He tried to pull away from the hero, but there was no way as he once again crushed him against his chest. I want my papers. I need Zashi to bring me the papers. The marriage papers. I'm going to marry Zashi. Izuku wanted to facepalm hard. He couldn't believe what he was listening. This was a really good blackmail material. You are already married to Zashi. I'm married to Zashi, asked Shota with an innocent surprise. Yes, you're married to Zashi. It's been a while. Izuku repeated like he was talking to a baby. Oh, I'm married to Zashi, Shota said, delight with the new. Izuku finally managed to escape the embrace using his ghostly powers. The atmosphere had quickly become awkward, and he had to bite his cheek to keep from laughing. Izuku wished having a camera so he could prove what Shota was saying. Yes, so you have to sleep until Zashi can come back? Okay. For a moment, Shota closed his eyes again with a look of absolute happiness in his face. Then, as if he remembered, he opened them alarmed. The papers. Izuku became desperate. You are already married. No, the adoption papers. I'm going to adopt you. You'll see. That sounded like a threat to Izuku, who, now that he had his hands free, finally managed to facepalm. Eraser. The pro-hero grinned twistedly as if he were enjoying the boy's desperation. I'm going to adopt you. You can run. You can hide. But you'll end up with my last name, kid. I don't care if you're a girl. I don't care about any fears you have. We'll overcome them. Together. As a family. That was when Izuku had had enough of this nonsense. Girl? What the hell did Eraser mean by if you're a girl? Izuku had never really thought about gender roles. He mostly spent his time thinking about being dead. How time passed, how he made those around him suffer, how he saw people grow while he remained unchanged. People changed a lot. For example, Dabi had one more chest hair now, something that seemed to excite him judging by how he looked in the mirror when he thought he was alone. It was one of those taboo topics that they had between them, like their heights or the corpse buried in the grave of a not dead person. Now, no, Izuku had never thought about his gender role or how he felt. He had never really thought about it, which left Izuku in confusion as to why others saw something in him that led them to such conclusion. Now, Izuku had a new confusion that he hadn't had before. Eraser, sleep. Sleep now. But, sleep. Izuku disappeared from Eraser's view. This time, he was ready to return to Tokyo with new confusions to explore and knowing that Eraser would survive pretty well without him. You know those movies where when a teenage guy sneaks out to party at night, they return home to find a parent waiting sitting in the dark, arms crossed, and a murderous look in their eyes. The kind of scene that usually happens on TV. And not in real life. Well, it seemed to be more common than Izuku believed, because there he was, avoiding eye contact with a Dabi, arms crossed, sitting on a stool right in front of the entrance, perhaps with dark circles under his eyes if it weren't for the burns under Dabi's eyes erasing the evidence. Izuku swallowed nervously. Hi, what time is it? Or rather, what day is it? Izuku audibly swallowed again. It's worth mentioning that more than 24 hours had passed since they had last seen each other. Well, he had spent almost the entire night with Eraser in observation. It wasn't until almost dawn that he could catch the first train back to Tokyo. And, not to mention, the time he spent at the cemetery in front of his non-existent grave before returning home. You know, a ghost occasionally had to connect with his corpse and narrate all his little stories. It should be understood that Izuku was supposed to have returned home the morning of the previous day. But no, the offer from a pedophile had been too tempting. Blame it all on the pedophile, thought Izuku. Tuesday. I got a little mixed up. Just a little? With what, precisely? Izuku scratched his head nervously. Dabi raised an eyebrow, detecting the first sign of weakness in his brat. I got sidetracked for a little while, Izuku confessed with a falsely innocent tone. No, Dabi wouldn't fall for that crude tactic. Perhaps Izuku was used to being an only child when he was alive, but when Dabi had an alive identity. He was the oldest of 4 siblings, and although it was only for 12 years, it gave him an experience that Izuku could never understand. Doing what, Izuku? The kid shrugged and half-heartedly kicked an abandoned sock lying in the middle of the floor. Oh, come on. We just had this same conversation a while ago. Dabi sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. It seems like you didn't quite get it, Dabi accused with a cold and false calm. You won't tell me where you've been? Izuku put his hands in the pockets of his gray hoodie. I was just taking a walk, Izuku chirped. No, he wasn't lying at all. It got out of hand, and I ended up giving manners lessons to a couple of adults. Dabi sharpened his gaze, scanning the boy, and spoke again with an icy coldness. So you've been doing vigilante stuff again? Yes. No, I mean, it wasn't intentional. I swear, Dabs. Izuku pleaded with his best puppy dog eyes. From icy cold, Dabi transitioned to intense fire. God damn it, Izuku. That is still vigilantism, you little shit. Izuku tried not to smile proudly about his exploits. Obviously, he failed. His smile was brighter than Dabi's uncontrollable flames. They were about to hurt kids. Low profile. Low profile. You'd think a short stack like you would understand that. But no. Izuku wasn't sure if Dabi was scolding him or venting aloud to himself. Either way, it was amusing to see the fire user gesturing with his hands constantly. It was especially funny because Dabi had lost control over the flames on his hands and he looked like he was trying not to touch anything in the apartment, unable to put himself out and trying not to burn down their new home. What did I tell you? Don't add to the population. Don't subtract from the population. Don't end up in the news. And where exactly did you end up? Dabi interrupted him, unable to contain his anger. Izuku looked quickly at the TV talking about the incident at the USJ. In my defense, there was a portal quirk involved. How was I supposed to know they were going to the USJ? Izuku said with a falsely innocent voice, like a child with a face covered in chocolate claiming they didn't eat the chocolate cake. Because I know you, you little shit. You aren't stupid, I know you listened in beforehand. Izuku took Dabi's words as praise and smiled happily. Okay, yeah, you got me. But they were attacking children. Innocent children. Well, almost all of them were innocent. Bakugo, on the other hand, well, he will never mention that part to Dabi. I cannot believe you. Seriously, I have met some of them. They are hellions. Dabi's murderous glare was sharp. Apparently, he didn't find it funny that Izuku was holding his breath not to burst into laughter. If he weren't already dead, he would fear that Dabi would try to kill him or attack him with a shoe. But it was awesome. Izuku couldn't contain himself and quickly jumped onto the couch, excited about the idea of sharing his adventures with Dabi. You had to see. I had never seen so many villains together. I mean, I've seen gangs. But that was something entirely different, Dabs. Villains working together. People who weren't used to working with others. It was amazing. And that quirk, teletransportation. Do you know how unique is that quirk? Dabi burst into flames even more before eventually extinguishing himself, slumping down resignedly on the couch. Izuku's excitement about recounting his adventure made him seem alive again. And Dabi couldn't resist seeing that light in Izuku's eyes. The older of the two listened carefully to the details escaping from the boy. Waves of anger engulfed him with each detail. At some point in the story, Dabi ended up with his forehead against the pillow, screaming until he ran out of breath. This was the only thing that stopped Izuku from telling Dabi about every quirk he had seen at the USJ. Understandably, Izuku had been talking non-stop about the USJ for 2 hours and 48 minutes. The advantages of being dead included not needing to pause for breath. It's worth noting that Dabi had stopped understanding more than half of what Izuku was saying due to how fast he was talking. Izuku fell silent, looking at Dabi with concern. Maybe he had crossed a line. Dabi seemed completely exhausted on the couch, as if he had just finished a 48-hour work shift. Dabs, are you angry? I know I didn't do what you told me, but I couldn't help doing something when I heard they were going to hurt kids. And a couple of hours later, I was at the USJ, and everything was happening. And I know it wasn't right. but I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't been there. And, Izuku, stop, Dabi pleaded. The boy fell silent, trembling like a leaf. He preferred Dabi's anger to the defeated aura he was seeing. Had he crossed the line for Dabi to kick him out of his life? Dabs. No, it's my fault for thinking that a hyperactive little shit like you could stay still for so long. This left Izuku speechless, feeling out of place. He pointed to himself, puzzled. Me, hyperactive. Dabi snorted without moving from the couch. Yes, pipsqueak, hyperactive. You always have to be doing something, or you mess things up one way or another. You're like a puppy that needs someone to play with him all the time, Dabi explained, his voice lacking any real malice. Izuku puffed up his cheeks and jumped onto the couch to sit in front of Dabi. No, the fire user couldn't escape Izuku's intense gaze of disappointment. Yeah, sure. The point is, if you don't have a goal, you become a catastrophic level agent of chaos. Izuku fell silent. As much as he hated to admit it, what Dabi had just said might make sense. Oh, so, I have to think about how I can entertain you so that you don't end up on the front page of the next national newspaper, Dabi said more to himself than to Izuku. The preteen started to sweat at the thought of what might be going through his big brother's mind. Still, I wanted to wait a bit, build a support network, but maybe you're ready to help me in my revenge against 𝗵𝗃 and kill him after ruining everything he loves in his life. Dabi blurted out with eyes glittering at one of the dumbest ideas Izuku had ever heard. And that's saying something, given that mixing cereal with vodka when there's no milk was one of many dumb ideas. Izuku stood up. No, Dabi, bad dog. Oh my god, I get distracted, and you're turning evil. Your levels are up. You're going down the wrong path. We're living in an apartment. He pointed out the obvious, proud for once of having a place that seemed somewhat livable for an average person. You have a job you like. Do you really want to throw all of this away for a bitter old man? Yes, Dabi responded without a second thought. Izuku sighed in disappointment. He grabbed a chair and dragged it over to sit in front of Dabi. No, the fire user couldn't escape the intense look of disappointment in Izuku's eyes. Dabi, do you think you're giving someone who doesn't deserve it too much power over your life? Dabi suddenly burst into flames, clearly disgusted by what Izuku had just said. You don't understand, Izuku. That man destroyed my life. Everything he touches turns to rot. He uses everyone, and when they're no longer useful, he throws them away without a second thought. Every word spoken by Dabi was laden with the most intense venom. The boy pouted. He had to be very careful in broaching such a delicate topic with Dabi. I can't say I know absolutely everything you've been through, Dabi, because only you can know that. It's been a horrible experience, and no one will ever deny you that. But Dabs, you deserve to be happy, Izuku assured him, taking Dabi's face in his hands and gently caressing the unburned skin, just as a racer had done hours earlier. You can't let him win and control your life, with your sole focus being to destroy him. What will you do when he's no longer around? Dabi blinked as if the answer was so obvious that it didn't make sense to respond. But he did anyway. I don't plan to survive my revenge, Zuku. Izuku let his hands drop and clenched his fists in anger. He already knew the answer. In fact, he had always known, but hearing it made it real. No, you can't do that, Dabi. Are you going to let that man dictate your life and even your death? I was born because of him, and I'll die ending him. You can't understand it, Izuku. You can't imagine the horrors he put me through. Izuku held his breath and tears back as he looked at Dabi. And that was worse than any response the boy could have given. Dabi tried to grab Izuku's hands, but his ghostly quirk prevented it. Dabs, don't you think you deserve to be loved? To live? Dabi smiled bitterly. Don't give me that live your life crap when you can't live yours because you're dead. He responded without thinking, and as soon as the words left his lips, he regretted them bitterly. But still, he said nothing as he watched Izuku's face contort with pain from those harsh words. Well, yes, Taoya. Don't call me that, Izuku. Dabi threatened in a low voice a little up than Asara. Izuku continued anyway. Yes, live because the truth is that being dead sucks. No matter what I do, I'll remain dead, Izuku replied in a whisper. I won't be able to grow up. I won't be able to love, to form a family. I won't be able to study what I want. I won't even be able to die completely. But at least in my death, I intend to help others because I can now. And that's my decision. Dabi looked away, unable to meet those troubled green eyes. You can't tell me to live for you, Pipsqueak. It's cruel. Izuku made a grimace. It's cruel to see someone very dear to me want to die. Wounded Izuku replied sharply. Dabi buried his head between his knees. You don't understand. Dabi, I understand everything I can about you. I hear everything you've told me. I see more than you think. I was in the Todoroki condominium, Izuku confessed, with no intention of wanting to upset Dabi, though clearly he did. 𝗵𝗲 has anxiety crises in secret. Natsuo tries not to step into the house. Shut up. Dabi yelled at the top of his lungs. Izuku remained silent. Both of them did, looking at each other for long minutes. Serious faces, hurt expressions, eyes gleaming with tears. Izuku was, as always, the first to speak. Endeavor created you to surpass him. He created all of you. He mistreated you, and he still does with the others. And you know what bothers you the most? It's not what he did to you. It's not what he's still doing to your siblings. It's that bastard still living happily, up to his dreams. Izuku, shut up, the fire user warned. Izuku ignored him. When someone dies, there's nothing left. Not everyone is like me, Izuku muttered bitterly, knowing he was the only ghost around. Once you're dead, there's no chance to see what happened. Nothing remains. You stop feeling. Living is hard because it makes you face another day with all your mistakes. Izuku, I don't know where you're going with this. I won't change my mind. Izuku shrugged. Technically, he already had a no, so trying was purely his most selfish decision. It bothers you that that bastard is still alive. Well, I think what would hurt him more is if you were alive, living your best life away from everything he represents, Izuku admitted with the purity of his naivety and his experience. I think it would hurt him 1,000 times more to know that you're happy, and it's not because of him, that you don't owe him anything, neither your sorrows nor your glories, that you've survived in spite of him, that he has no power over you, that he doesn't own your past, your future, not your nightmares, not your death. Dabi gave a bitter smile, rising to look at the preteen as if he were a child who couldn't see reality in front of his eyes. Oh, you want me to show up on my private yacht and give him the middle finger? Izuku didn't laugh. He didn't find Dabi's venomous sarcasm amusing. Well, I don't see you on a massive body of water without burning a ship, he admitted with the same dry tone. But I also don't think he'd be too pleased if his dead son appeared from beyond the grave to talk about the abuse he put you all through. I also think he'd die if the world found out his son is gay. Well, everything you are would give him a stroke. But what do I know? I'm just a ghost. Dabi watched closely as the preteen stood up from the chair. He zipped up his hoodie all the way and pulled the hood down to cover his eyes, all under Dabi's icy gaze. I'll be back, Izuku warned, not willing to lose their friendship over an argument. I don't know when, but I'll be back, he added, putting his hands in his pockets to avoid digging his nails into his palms. I need to think. I recommend you do the same. By the time Dabi reacted and found his voice, Izuku had already vanished before his eyes. He sat there, unable to cry for his burned tear ducts, but with a heavy heart, feeling that the apartment was too big for one person suddenly. Hours earlier, in one of Tokyo's cemeteries, just after dawn, Shoto Todoroki appeared. He didn't usually visit his brother's grave so often. His brother had died when he was still very young. He could hardly remember him, to be honest. Considering that his brother had been dead longer than he'd been alive since Shoto was born, it wasn't surprising. What was he doing so early in the cemetery alone, just a day after the USJ attack? Looking in the distance at the low figure of a boy who seemed to be narrating the entire USJ attack to his brother's grave. How did Shoto know this, given that he was observing from a distance? Well, that green-haired guy seemed enthusiastic, providing a good representation of how he was slapping an invisible being. Shoto Todoroki was right. The boy from the USJ was the same one he had seen earlier at his brother Taoya's grave. What was the connection? He wasn't sure, but he was determined to get to the bottom of his theory. Meanwhile, in the distance, Izuku pretended to stick a finger into an imaginary head.